Hello, good morning, and how are you guys doing today? Today we're going to be knocking out a free Harvard class, Prediction X, Omens, Oracles, and Prophecies. And so we're going to knock out this entire class in a single morning. I'm excited to do it. If you're interested in taking a free Harvard course, of course, there is a link in the description below, or you can type in free Harvard courses. Go right here to this website under Harvard University. Click into the free courses, in which you're going to find that there is a variety of free courses. It's going to eventually have you set up an edX account. edX is, of course, going to allow you to actually have the option of taking courses from more than just Harvard. And so, if you're interested in learning or kickstarting yourself back into the swing of learning, it's a great place to start. I've knocked out a few of these courses. I have enjoyed them thoroughly, and I've actually found things to learn from each one of them. So, let's go ahead and get this started. I'm hoping to enjoy it myself. By the way, if you want to, you can pay to receive credits for these courses. We're going to be doing the auditing path, so I'm not going to receive credit for it. We're just going to learn the information. I'm absolutely okay with just learning the information. Before we get too far into it, though, I'm going to make sure that we have a actual stream up and get chat up, just in case you guys have questions or comments. I am watching all of this from a phone, so please remember that I do try to watch everything and catch anything you guys say. But if I miss something, it's not personal. It's just, hey, watching chat on a phone is not always the easiest thing, right? So, hope you all are kicking butt. Let's get going. Welcome to Omens, Oracles, and Prophecies, part 1 of a 3-part project on edX called PredictionX. In the grand scheme of PredictionX, the material in this part comes first. Chronologically, though rarely, are things so linear. For example, in this course alone, there are prediction systems that range from not having been practiced for thousands of years to ones that are still practiced today. Still, broadly, we can classify the material on Prediction X project into these 3 parts. Part 1, Oracles, Omens, and Prophecies. Part 2, the rise of theory, which includes the already released Jon Snow and, I don't know how to say this name, Cholera outbreak of cholera. I apologize. I thought this was another. Jon Snow and the cholera outbreak of 1854, and modern simulations is part 3. Preview of the material from all 3 parts is available outside of edX on predictionx.org. Introduction. Humans have been interested in the future throughout their past. History is full of tales of great leaders consulting oracles, shamans, and psychics tapping into the spiritual world, and of elaborate systems designed to turn phenomena observable into today's world into omens foretelling tomorrows. Omens, Oracles, and Prophecies has 2 main sections: the Diviner's Guide and cross-cultural conversations. We also include a framework of predictive systems to help contextualize the systems discussed here and in subsequent parts of Prediction X. The Diviner's Guide showcases methods and divinations whose origins go back many thousands of years, ranging from astrology to Chinese bone burning to Mesopotamian sheep entrails. Each of these predictive systems covered has its own in-depth page, which includes a written summary, video, and link to additional resources. Feel free to test your knowledge in the assessment section when you're done. Cross-cultural conversations. presents interviews with Harvard experts on the role of prediction in different cultures on different continents over millennia. By putting these histories and perspectives in conversations with one another, we investigate the similarities, differences, and changes in divinatory and predictive systems throughout the world. We encourage you to explore this material at your own pace. Boom. Let's get this going, right? It looks like this is going to be good. I like this kind of stuff, and in all honesty, it's likely to help us in making whatever future novels we write more rich. So, super excited to see this. It's, of course, 3:30 in the morning, so coffee is a necessity, just so you guys know. Frequent asked questions. What is the schedule for this course? You have until the end of the course to complete all of the required assignments needed for a certificate. See the course end date on the homepage. We're not worried about the certificate. We're just going to knock us out in one day, so it doesn't really matter. Okay, how do I pass the course? In order to pass the course, you'll need to complete the final quiz and earn a minimum of 70%. If I pass, when do I receive my certificate? All students who passed and are enrolled in the certificate track will receive the certificate within a week of posted deadline. If you finish the requirements for the certificate well before that deadline, you will receive your certificate. Certificates are electronic only. How many attempts do I have for each question in the final? You have 3 attempts for each question in the final quiz. And you can only attempt the quiz one time. I caught a bug or error in the course. How do I contact the teaching team? Please contact edX if you have an issue with the course. Congrats. Yes, we are going to keep going. No, we do not want to pay for it, even with a 30% off. I knock out too many of these courses, guys. If we had to pay for everything we did, it would be a very expensive lifestyle. I like learning. I like learning more than I have a love for having a bunch of random certificates, right? Now, we're going to start getting into the stuff right here. I'm excited to do it. Let's go. The framework for predictive systems helps us classify and understand similarities and differences amongst predictive methods across time and culture. It is used throughout PredictionX to think, it is, no, it does say it is used. Okay, it is used throughout PredictionX to think about classes of inputs to predictive systems, the systems themselves, and processes for refining systems. To improve their accuracy, predictive systems can be classified based on their type of inputs. The framework breaks down these inputs into 4 broad categories: random, randomized, human, non-random. Systems described in the Diviner's Guide and discussions in cross-cultural conversations use a variety of these inputs, but they rarely go beyond make prediction. In the cycle of improvement shown to the right, the ideas of evaluating accuracy and making changes to a predictive system are relatively modern concepts that many historians associate with the origin of modern science. You can click on elements of the diagram below to learn more about them. Oh, good to know. And keep reading below to learn about the whole framework. Let's see what we can learn, right? Okay, so we're going to click the random one first. We'll work all the way around, guys. Oh, this isn't bad. Oh, look at this. We can just read down through this whole page. It'll cover the whole thing, right? Good to know, right? I thought so too. Let's double check. Random. Definition. Inputs seem from naturally occurring random processes without systematic predictability and without any intervention from human beings, sometimes called spontaneous. Example, Roman bird aguary. Okay, I don't know anything about the Roman bird aguary. Let's open that in a new tab and see what it says about it. Okay. How to seek predictions. Entry or augury with access to birds, or you may need to find a special bird, plus possible equipment to measure or observe the behavior. An augur trained to interpret the behavior of birds. Ancient Roman divination was tied to the concept of auspices. I don't know this concept, guys. We're going to Google it real quick. Don't worry, we're still ripping through this. Okay.
Auspices.
Auspices is a noun that means the support, guidance, or sponsorship of a person, organization, or institution. It is mostly common used in the phrase under the auspice of, which indicates that an event, project, or group is being backed, funded, or officially protected by an authority body. Okay, good to know. Which literally means look for the future fortunate signs in birds. In Latin, an individual, we already know what that is called. Indeed, the founding myth of Rome involves Romulus and Remus performing bird augury to decide that Rome should be built on the Palatine Hill. Okay? Notably, however, like most things in Roman religion, the concept of auspices appears to be borrowed from other religions, specifically the ancient Greek. Auspices were taken before any major undertaking began in ancient Rome. The bird apparently made random flight patterns and noises, and whether or not they fed when offered food were all interpreted by human augurs as auspices. The signs relied by the augurs were often vague, and most explanations beyond the vague prediction were simply that it was the will of the gods. As a result, at least in the case of public auspices, the Roman Senate debated the meaning of the auspices before coming to a actionable decision. Okay, so interesting divination based on bird behavior. Who would have known? I think it's fascinating, right? Let's get on to the next thing. Comments and caveats. Diviners must wait for an unscheduled event before making a prediction about the future. One can always debate just how random any system really is. For example, bird flights patterns are well known to correlate with weather patterns, magnetic fields, and other natural phenomena. For the purposes of this framework, though, we classify systems based on how they were or interpreted by their users, e.g., the perspective of the Romans. The flight and call of the birds were entirely random. Definition. Input is the result of a process that a human initiates for the express purposes of producing a random outcome. That's randomized. Tossing objects that roll to test on a random face. Human action is needed to initiate the process, but the side of the bones where the bone die comes to rest should be random. Comments and caveats. There can be fraud or biased outcomes if input devices do not actually produce random outcomes, such as weighted dice. Dice-like systems have been used for millennia, e.g., astrology. Leo. I've never seen this spelling of it. That's not astrology, and so I'm not astrologio. I'm gonna say I don't know really anything about that, but let's look it up just because we want to make sure that we're doing what we should be doing to know what we're actually talking about. Oh. The ancient Greek term for knuckle bones, the natural ankle bone, talus, or sheep or goat. Because the bone has two rounded sides, it cannot land on them, leaving only four flat sides. This made them the precursor to modern dice and jacks, Oh, okay. I'm going to tell you what. Good to know. I didn't know that. Systems like IFA, which involve small objects being moved around on a shaking tray, are similar to throwing dice in that essentially unpredictable physical process intervene to randomize a diviner selection. Human definition: inputs that come directly from the diviner, or at the very least, inputs that come from a source not discernible by anybody besides the diviner. Utterings of possessed persons, the oracles of Delphi. By the way, there's a gas that naturally occurs in the caves of Delphi. They weren't possessed, they were actually just exposed to gas. You guys can look it up and find out what specific gas it is. I don't remember right now. But in reality, the oracles at Delphi were actually exposed to slightly toxic gases. A woman purportedly possessed by supernatural forces responds often ambiguously to a question. Comments and caveats. Prediction systems based on human data can be conceptualized as the diviner begins a sort of spokesperson of the divine. Not shocked. Non random. The definition comes from the observation of any process through though to be repeating, predictable, or in some way knowable in a consistent fashion. Measuring the positions of planets. While ancient astronomers may have not known the cause of planetary motion, they knew the position of the planets followed a standard repeating path with respect to the background of the stars. Comments and caveats. One must be careful to distinguish non-random inputs from an end-to-end deterministic predictive system. The latter, a full deterministic predictive system, is exemplified by physics' modern understanding of the theory of gravity, which today is so good as to be able to predict the position of a distant comet as well as enough to land a spacecraft on it. Meanwhile, though astrology has and still does rely on deterministic inputs, e.g., position of the planet, to make non-deterministic predictions based on human reading of mystical portents. We think of most modern science as being deterministic, and indeed, modern science is based on the premise of being able to prove claims falsible or not based on repeatedly doing the same experiment and getting the same result. However, as we see in this course, most of the system in the Diviner's Guide do not fall within the category of deterministic, with a few notable exceptions, astrology serving as a bridge in that it was not originally deterministic, but which astrology did contribute to the growth of the field of astronomy, and, fascinatingly, Babylonian haruspice. We're going to have to pull this up, guys. I don't know what this is, so just going to be honest. By the way, it keeps on clicking down my chat, so I'm trying to keep track of chat. We'll keep it up. We don't need the certificate on this, but we're glad to be offered it a bunch, I guess. To seek a prediction, consult a trained expert, either a royal or as a commoner. Okay. Equipment, instruments to a sacrifice of sheep, or extract its liver clay tablet with divination instructions. And extract its liver clay tablet. I'm gonna be honest, I'm not really sure about what the hell a sheep's liver clay tablet would be, but good to know. This is kind of interesting. The people of ancient Mesopotamia believed their futures to be largely predetermined by gods. Over thousands of years, the Babylonian, Akkadian, Sumerian, and other Mesopotamian cultures thrived, their priests and astrologers developed ever more sophisticated methods to peer into the predetermined futures. One of the most noteworthy of these predictive systems was haruspice, divination by means of inspecting animal entrails. The animals, often sheep, were sacrificed in ceremonies where the sun god could influence the appearance of the exta, or entrails. For a handsome fee, trained diviners called baru or haruspeks could answer a current yes or no question by looking at the sun god's answer in the entrails, presumably for some future features of the entrails were purely natural, and some were caused by random mutations, but all were interpreted by a human expert haruspeks. Haruspice, also known as ecstaspice, is in various forms, goes back to at least the 3rd millennia BC and is still practiced in some parts of the world today. Mesopotamians were also great observers of the deterministic sky. Deeply interested in astrology, often both haruspeks and astrologers were asked for predictions about the same questions, and there may have been interesting intersections among these predictive traditions. Okay. Trained for haruspeks would Training for haruspeks would have been highly specialized, as the actual process of divining was very elaborate. By the time of Barutu, or Art of the Diviner, manual for the Expesi was published. Copies known dated from about 600 BC and earlier. It took up 135 clay tablets as 60 lines of cuneiform each. Like a modern medical manual, the Barutu and earlier simpler instructions often inscribed on clay models of the organs, typical sheep livers, detailed various conditions that the diviner might find on extracted organs, indicating which of these conditions were positive, aspacious, or negative, inaspacious. A haruspeks examining an organ features would add up the positive against the negative signs, and depending on which of the two prevailed, he would judge the reading to be favorable or unfavorable. But that was often not the end of the procedure, since it is unlikely that a astispice would ever yield 100% positive or negative results. A diviner might perform a second ecstaspice to reduce uncertainty. In this sense, the Baru acted like a modern scientist, seeking to replace the results of an earlier experiment to assess veracity. Haruspice has usually been important in PredictionX, has an unusual importance in PredictionX, as the Barutu manual mentioned above actually contains some purely theoretical predictions in that they refer to anatomical oddities that had never been observed. In much the same way, Isaac Newton's theory of gravity can predict the behavior of moving objects without any observations of prior similar circumstances. As will be explained in more detail in the path to Newton, featured within Part 2 of PredictionX, Newton's theory of gravity was the culmination of history that began with observations of the sky, continued on the recording of observations, then to empirical theories that explain and predict what observed, e.g., Kepler's law, and then finally on to truly predictive theory, Newton's timeline. I don't think we need to know the timeline, guys. I think we just read that and we kind of got the clue on it. not wanting to click through their little videos this morning that much, but we might later in a second. The box in the diagram labeled predictive systems can be thought of as the core of instruction set or algorithm for making predictive use of a particular system. The simplest possible example of such an algorithm would read, if you observe A, prediction B. As in, if you roll a 4 on a die, predict the current will meet her future spouse tomorrow. Okay? Almost no predictive system is quite that simple, and many rely heavily on the expertise of interpretive skills of the diviner. We discussed several different predictive systems in Diviner's Guide, but hundreds more can be discovered on the Methods of Divination Wikipedia page. In more scientific predictive systems, we can clearly understand how observed inputs come together to create predictive systems. For example, with Newton's famous equation, F equals ma is a predictive system. If we can observe mass and acceleration, then we can predict what force will be. Unlike Newton's equation, Diviner's Guide systems are sometimes a bit unknowable at this stage. Someone observing from the outside looking in cannot always know how exactly the predictive system really works. In some cases, there is mysticism inherent to the predictive system, such as with humans-based prediction systems like Egyptian diviners. Sometimes the system appears unknowable because it has a high-level complexity that requires years of training to fully understand it, such as the IFA. Finally, we might not know the details of how exactly the predictive system works because that information has been lost to history, such as the Chinese oracle bones, where we don't know for sure if the diviners were interpreting the shape or the sound of the crack in the bones. Okay, good to know. I honestly don't know that either. Observation. Observation of the data is the first step to making and analyzing prediction. We can think of this as input that comes from the prediction system and is fed into the algorithm of the framework. In ancient predictive systems, this could range from the flight of birds to how a bone cracks, while in modern predictive systems, this can range from the observation of planet locations to the results of a survey asking someone who they intend to vote for in an upcoming election. In theory, more observations made, the stronger a prediction system can become. As is discussed in the section of Make Changes. We've covered all this stuff a little bit. We'll get to that one though. Once the observed inputs are processed through the predictive system, the practitioner will make a prediction. The definitiveness and clarity of the prediction varies from system to system. In the case of Newton's F equals ma, there is no wiggle room in the prediction. The value of force will be as precise as the observed precision of mass and acceleration. In contrast, many prediction systems in Diviner's Guide incorporate ambiguity, intentional or otherwise, such as possibly apocryphal. Oh, apocryphal. Okay, we're good. Stories about the oracles of Delphi making predictions that can be ironically misinterpreted by the oracle's practitioners. Evaluating accuracy. The next step of the framework is to evaluate the accuracy of the prediction. The question here appears simple. Was the prediction correct or not? Often, however, there can be a deeper level of complexity, since often there can be confusion where the prediction was accurate, but the process, e.g., the prediction system itself, was not based on accurate facts. For example, when studying the cholera outbreak in 1900s, the 19th century, the Menzma theory appeared to be accurate and even had convincing data to show a correlation between elevation and cholera. Unfortunately, they did not know they were confusing correlation and causation. Individuals at lower elevations were getting cholera not because of mesmia, but because water at lower elevation was generally more contaminated with a fecal matter from the Thames. Okay, good to know. The dividing line between Part 1, Oracle and Omens and Prophecies, and Part 2, the rise of theory prediction systems, seems to be whether or not they evaluated accuracy. Once prediction systems become more scientific, we see an increased emphasis on empirical measurements whether or not the prediction was accurate. Again, using John Snow as an example, we can see where Snow's prediction about cholera being spread by water were latter supported by evidence found during the Broad Street cholera outbreak, and also by Snow's larger study of London water companies. Today, in many fields, this process of evaluating accuracy has been standardized and is a central component of the prediction system in the not yet released Part 3 modern solutions. Okay, good to know. There are some rare exceptions in Part 1 prediction systems that seem to incorporate evaluating accuracy. For example, inscriptions on Chinese oracle bones sometimes include if the prediction was accurate or not. What we don't know if this then followed into a final step, make changes. The final step in a framework is to make changes to the prediction system based on the accuracy evaluation. This is more of a recursive step than an ultimate goal, and idealized prediction system is never finalized, but is constantly making changes based on any observation that shows imprecision in the prediction. Similar to evaluating accuracy, making changes to prediction systems is not normally a feature of diviner's guide systems. However, it should be noted the historical evaluation of almost all these systems is undocumented, e.g., there is not clear written records covering hundreds of years that describe how the Aztec rituals came to be in their final form prior to the Spanish conquest. Thus, it is possible many of these systems changed and evolved through their existence, though not necessarily by evaluating the accuracy of the predictions. This is in contrast to many modern day simulations which are based on constant, never-ending, iterative learning and changing in the order to constantly get a more accurate prediction. One final note. We do not mean to dismiss or to be dismissive or condescending to systems in this part. PredictionX, because they do not go through the stages of evaluate accuracy and make changes. While it is true prediction systems have progressively improved in validity and at making more accurate predictions, they not always in a perfectly chronographically linear way. There are other purposes to prediction systems besides making accurate predictions, as seen when we go in depth on each system in the Diviner's Guide. Prediction systems serve many crucial purposes. The passing of specialized knowledge from mentor to apprentice, the building of a sense of community, the legitimatization of power are just a few of the non predictive purposes of the systems we discuss in the Diviner's Guide. Okay, so let's click back because we read through all that. Wasn't that fun? Oh, they were just going to give us that anyway, so we click next here. Why click into stuff when we can just get it? The Diviner's Guide. Look over this real quick. This doesn't look very big at all. Maybe it is. The Diviner's Guide showcases methods of divination whose origin goes back many hundreds to thousands of years, ranging from astrology to Chinese bone burning to Mesopotamian sheep entrails. Each of the predictive systems covered has its own in-depth page, which includes a summary, video, and link to additional resources. Feel free to test your knowledge using these assessments when you're done. Get started by exploring the table of contents below. We see the table of contents. We already read the Horosby one. We kind of know that this is a sheep's knuckle, comments and stuff like that. Let's look through this. I think we're going to be pretty good at this. This isn't going to be a huge amount of stuff, guys. Tarot cards, those are interesting. All this stuff's kind of pretty reasonable. This table of contents in the graph form above and listed in text below provides a handy overview of all of the divination systems discussed in this guide. Clicking a system will take you to the page offering textual and video description as well as a link where you can learn more. Using the image-based slider on each page to skip around amongst systems. The tags preceded by hashtag if the text on each system page refers back to the framework for predictive systems. The framework gives a high-level overview of the predictive systems work, and the tags are meant to contextualize each system described in the guide within the framework. Hint, the assessment will ask you about how the systems described here relate to the framework, and the tags are meant to highlight those connections. Okay, so I'm going to grab a pen. We're going to grab a few note cards. Obviously, we know that this is going to be part of the test, so we are going to take notes. I think we understand what astrology is and stuff like that. Table of contents. Do we need to go through them, or is it going to go through them? It is going to go through them, so we're good. Let's go down to the hashtags. Are there hashtags in here? Okay, yes. So, astrology is randomized in human. Let's note that right off the bat. If there's any more notes that we need to take, we will. Okay, let's read about astrology. I think we all know what it is. Astrology, which derives from the Greek word astrologia, is the study of heavenly bodies in an attempt to explain and understand the mysterious and complex relationships between the universe as a whole and human beings. Historically, there are a variety of different forms of astrology, with the first documented evidence of Western and Near Eastern astrology coming from ancient Mesopotamia in 2000 BCE. And let's go with Mesopotamia, 2000 BCE. I think we all get that. Astrological systems being developed independently in ancient China, Mesoamerica, and India, while modern-day astrology primarily focuses on individual level predictions. What we think of horoscopes Astrologers in ancient times often took a more big picture focus as they attempted to use the stars to divine the will of the gods for all humanity. Astrological systems are often quite intricate and detailed, as can be seen in Professor Goodman's conversation with modern day astrology Kathleen Medina. Intricacies and alleged, alleged details are not new. Ancient astrologers across cultures all sought better and better observations of the stars to improve their predictions. Babylonian sky priests referenced Anumon, Enu, Enlil, when Anu Elel, a collective and sensitive tablet. Okay, let's write this down. Their text was the, what is it? Mea Anu and little. Okay, we've got that. A collection of 70 tablets containing around 7,000 astronomical observation of planet stars and terrestrial events from old Babylonian period. A classic Chinese work called the Zai Wi Do Shu dates back to something before 1000 AD and was used by the emperor to tell his fortune based on the interpretation of the imperial astronomers, interpreting the 28 Chinese constellations. Whew. These collections of observations, stellar data, can be seen as a sort of forerunner to modern astronomy, a connection we will discuss in much more detail in the PredictionX feature, The Path to Newton. It is also important to keep in mind that astrology is almost unique among ancient systems because its inputs, see framework diagram, we already have that, is based on fully deterministic, we got to put deterministic, system, the position of heavenly bodies, but is extremely human in how it's interpreted. Most ancient systems rely instead on purposely randomized, and we've got randomized, inputs. Of those occurring randomly, augury, the flight of birds, so this isn't really randomized. So let's pull out randomized because it was randomized in their world, in the ancient world, because they didn't know that stuff the same. So we'll question mark the randomized on it, just in case. We get 3 guesses anyway. For the most part, for almost the beginning of recorded history, it was clear people knew the position of heavenly bodies had a rhythm to them that was not random. Okay, so I would say that the random part is a no, it is not random. Let's go ahead. We're going to listen to conversations with an astrologer if it's not super long, because we are trying to get through this whole course in a single day. So let's see. This is 30 minutes, 10 minutes we can do. See what's going on.
A lot of times when we're talking about this PredictionX effort in many different venues, people say, oh, you must be doing a lot about astrology, because they know I'm an astronomer.
Right, right.
And I say, no, actually I know nothing about astrology, but given how many people are very, very interested in their own horoscope today, and people have been interested in that for generations, we really thought it was important to include an expert astrologer, modern astrologer, in the course, not Isaac Newton, who's an expert old astrologer.
When I think of astrology, I think of it's man in astronomy. You know, it's this kind of how it might affect that person.
Yeah.
Those planets around the person. So when we look at a chart, we are looking at the center as if you were standing in the center, and the center's Earth.
Okay.
Okay, so obviously, you know, the solar system's, it would be heliocentric.
Right.
But when we look at it, we're looking at it from you on the Earth and what the planets are symbolizing about you.
Is there any kind of like physical connection between the actual pull of planets, for example, on a person and what is forecast for them?
Everything's interconnected.
Okay.
And so that's my sense, and that the movements do affect us. And I'm not sure what it is, but I can tell you after years of working with people in charts, it's uncanny what a chart reveals and what the movements of the planets or stars can say about the person.
You
what's
got me
gonna
very
happen.
curious.
So
Yeah.
I'm not sure what the
Yeah.
exact connection. I know there's a connection.
Okay.
You know, and from observation, personal observation.
Right.
You know, not just going on faith, but that this is amazing how, you know, certain things just come over
if
out
I
over and
understand,
over.
a lot of it is like people have done this kind of astrology for thousands of years, and I don't want to put words in your mouth, but they just kind of learned more and more about what kind of things you can predict from the positions of planets.
Exactly. I think a lot of this is in some ways pattern recognition. You know, when you have certain combinations, certain things tend to happen. And
Now, would the same things happen for all people born at the same time in the same place?
no. And that's what that's where it's interesting. So I was just going to say,
Okay.
I don't believe that everything's set in stone. You know, I believe that there's basic patterns, and then we have this free will to move within these patterns.
Okay.
So you'll see some people with a certain configuration that's very pronounced, and you'll go, oh, that person's going to be very successful, or they can do, and maybe that doesn't fully materialize. And if they had somebody else born on that date at that place is important too, at that time, which is very important at the time, they may completely, you know, fulfill that potential that we're reading in the chart. Astrology, because it's so intricate, is about the relationships between that planet and the sign, which means the part of the sky it was in, and how it's relating to the other planets and relating to Earth at a particular time or particular day or a particular place.
What would you
It
say is the balance
almost
among
sounds
your
like
clients
she's
of people
saying
who
it
are
predicts the
very seriously
potential
looking
of
to you for
something
advice
and not
about,
the
you know, business
actual
decisions
something.
in their love life,
Just
or
for the
whatever,
record.
and then other people who are just kind of curious and want to have the experience of knowing their horoscope.
In my practice, I would say I'm about 85% more serious
Okay.
guidance, and maybe 15 to 20% more of the curious.
Got it. Do you ever give people bad news?
Well, I don't look at anything as bad or good. I look at it all as energy. I'll tell people what to look for.
Okay.
Yeah. I can tell when there's going to be a lot of change. Okay, I can tell when somebody's going to go, they're going to need to let something big go. Okay, so I can tell if there's something going on maybe with Pluto working or Saturn aspecting Pluto, that they're going to have to let a way of being go, or there's some aspect of their lifestyle that needs to change. And my feeling is, I'm kind of an optimist anyway, but my feeling is that how I read astrology is it's a way to understand ourselves and our lives to help us. So if there are the more difficult, or you're saying bad or challenging aspects, I ultimately see it from the big picture as trying to help us evolve.
Given that we were talking about this being a long tradition and that people didn't know Pluto was even there, or that it was a planet or a dwarf planet or whatever we want to call it, but
Yeah.
something in the solar system, does it have new significance because it exists, or?
Well, I understand your question. So yeah, we didn't read the 3 outer planets, right, until the last, 150 years or so. And so we wouldn't have looked at that probably as aspecting Pluto. This is your map of you.
Okay.
And this
My
is
universe.
This is your universe.
Got
this
it.
is giving
Okay.
me like a Polaroid
Okay.
of what was in the sky.
Okay.
Okay, and so when you were born, and we need the place, the date, but we need the time to be really accurate.
Okay.
Because as you know, the planets rotate 24 hours. So what's coming up over the horizon's changing every 2 hours roughly, and that's called your ascendant. This sets the tone of the whole chart. So what's rising in the sky is setting the whole tone for you in terms of how it's like the lens you see life through.
Okay.
That's called
We'll
your
write that
ascendant or
down.
rising
Ascendant
sign.
seems like
Okay.
something we should
Your
know.
rising sign is Libra, and Libra is an air sign, so this is more working with the intellect. Libra is also about balance. Libra's the scales, right? So we have balance, we have diplomacy. It's very partnership oriented, wanting to work together with other people and teams. So the houses are fields of influence. In your case, 9th house up here, top of the chart, is representing higher education. It's representing developing the mind. It's representing foreign travel. It's expansion of what's possible in the world.
So let me back up for a second. So this is about what we've been saying is about sort of kind of person I might be, what kind
Yeah.
of personality I have, and then does this kind of horoscope get more specific about events that are going to happen in the
Absolutely.
future, or just people's tendencies?
No, we do both.
Okay.
So this is your map. This is your star map. Or
Got
this is giving me a blueprint. This is your basic makeup.
Okay.
Okay, as an astrologer to look at it. This is permanent for you. So then what we do is we can look at any particular time.
Do you guys
person's
feel
life.
she's just saying what she
Now, when
knows
people
about
come
the
to see
lady,
me,
or she's directly actually
they're usually
interpreting
looking
it?
at what's
Because
going
I'm
on
not
now,
sure either way.
or maybe this next
she might
year,
be.
or roughly at this time. And so I do what's called a transit. There's different things you can do. I do a transits chart because it's most literal. It's literally where the planets are and transiting, in the orbit, and how they may be aspecting your birth chart. So what we do is when we look at predictions, we're looking at what is that nature, and what may be aspecting it. Maybe what is what's another word I can use for that? What is playing on it?
Okay.
So basically, it's another way of saying what's up for you.
Okay, yeah, what's up for me?
What's up for you? One of the things that does jump at me is that you've had Uranus. This is Uranus in Aries. It's been in Aries since about March. The planet Uranus has been in Aries since, I think, March 2011. So about 7 years it's in there. Right? It has an 84-year orbit. And it is working its way through your 7th house. What that tells me, without knowing you, is this could be very interesting, good news for your love life. And because Uranus in Aries is wanting to, Uranus is, we call it the awakener. Okay, we call it the awakener or the rejuvenator. And it's in Aries. It's like wanting new energy, new action.
Sounds great. I have a lot of decisions to make about how many long trips to go on in the next 6 months or so.
Okay.
And it could be anywhere from about 3 to about 6. And 6 seems like kind of too much. And is there any reason I should go on every trip that I could go on?
So I can see that more opportunities are coming to you. I mean, no question. And
She just told you
travel would be
that.
one of them. However, you don't have to take everything that comes along, right? And there's more of a relaxing into some of this. It's in your. Here's one thing I'm going to tell you for sure: is you need to trust your intuition more. And I'm not just saying that as a blanket statement. I'm saying that to you because
it.
you have planets lining up in such a way that are suggesting that your intuition is opening even more. This could even indicate like a spiritual opening, some sort of it could be through religious study, it could be through an experience, but it's a spiritual opening. It's an opening in that consciousness. this is indicating a lot of intuition. You already are extremely intuitive based on your birth chart. This is tied to the travel question.
Okay, what
so
does that mean?
This is, I'm not going to say taking it easier. Let me find the words for you.
More time at the spa?
Yes. And you know
excellent.
what? You know, honestly, I don't.
Okay, well, we'll just accept that that was interesting. I don't know what I think about that. Let's click to the next one. Aztec ritual. Yeah, Aztecs. Let's get a new note card. Okay, new note card. Aztec rituals. Man, we are flying through these. We might actually knock this out before it's way early in the morning even still. Who knows? Okay, Aztec rituals, guys. Ready for this one? To seek a prediction, consult a trained expert, applicable for both commoners and royalty. Okay, good to know. Equipment. Sortilege? Oh, the throwing of dice. Gazing deep into reflective surfaces, observations of nature, including the motion of the stars and planets. Personnel is a trained expert. I almost think we should be writing this down, but maybe not. Okay. Aztec civilization, which consisted mainly of the Nahu people, which I have no idea who these people are, that's interesting to know, speak of the Nahuatl language. Coalesced in the 13th and 14th century CE in the basin of Mexico in and around the modern metropolis of Mexico City. The Aztecs believed that in a primordial time prior to the Fifth Age, in which we are currently living live, their gods currently live, their gods obscured humans' ability to see the past and future as clearly as gods could. Old legends say nature of this obscuration was as if the gods breathed on a mirror that would otherwise show the true nature of the world around. In the past, present, and future, in the video below, Professor David Carrasco suggests the gods purposely clouded the mirror for fear that otherwise humans would know much about their own future as the gods did. Divination through ritual process is an act that goes far back in time in native Mesoamerican tradition and is even described in the creation myths as something the gods did prior to their creation of the world. The Maya and Aztec both believed some people with their societies had a closer relationship with the gods and supernatural domains than others, and thus had increased access to information about the future or advice from the gods. The remarkable people, human prediction experts. Okay, so we're going to human hashtag. Were ritual specialists known as daykeepers or soothsayers. In the Kandais, too, astronomer priests who observed and recorded astronomical information on the movement of celestial bodies across the skies. 3. Members of the royal family who could conjure dead ancestors or patron gods for advice or favor. So let's write down all these, right? We've got the Kandais people, astrologers, and I don't know. The Conjuring the Dead, speaking to the dead. We'll just write speaking to the dead. I think that covers them. Daykeeper or counters still exist today in many native Mesoamerican communities, and they interpret a 200 wait. Oh, okay, there really is. And they interpret a 260-day ritual calendar using, and we'll write this down, 260 calendar. We don't know if it's going to be important or not, right? Ritual calendar using divinatory condice as a guidance to determine the fate of auspiciousness of a specific day, signed number combinations in the calendar. Daykeepers would be consulted when a child was born before its naming ceremonies, since one of an Aztec person name was always based on their day of birth, and many characteristics of their lives are predetermined by this date/name. In many Mesoamerican traditions, dreams are often considered to be a type of communication with the supernatural world. The same was true of events occurring in the natural world that Aztecs believed were omens. With predictive meaning, Aztec people had certain common beliefs about the everyday predictive powers of random natural events, but some things occurred that people thought were strange enough to warrant consulting with ritual specialists for higher prognostication. Examples include omens of the fiery comet or bird with a mirror on its head birds with a mirror on its head that were observed and recorded and correlated with the arrival of Europeans in 1519. Honestly, I don't know what they're talking about with the bird with a mirror on its head. That's what they thought a comet was, probably. Bird with a mirror on its head. Interesting. Okay, we'll go along with that. That's kind of crazy. While all social classes consulted diviners and soothsayers, special high-ranking ritual experts from the noble classes were consulted by royals in matters of states. In addition to interpretations of dreams, omens, and the calendars, soothsayers also used various techniques involving external stimuli for prognostication. By creating randomized patterns with everyday materials, e.g., casting maize kernels or beans across textiles or into waters, diviners interpreted patterns of portending particular future events. Interpreting randomized inputs. Okay, so we do have randomized inputs. Throwing the dice is part of a class of prediction more generally known as sortilege. They also use scrying and peering into reflective surfaces, mirrors, crystal rocks, or water. Observations of the movement of animals or insects, or observation of color changes in the water to predict positive or negative outcomes, and even to diagnose illnesses. In similar ways, the ancient Mayans, the Aztec, also made careful observations and records of visible astronomical events over extended periods of time that were used to predict future-like in-kind events, or to back-calculate eclipses or other celestial phenomenon that could then be correlated with socio-political or natural events that impacted life on the earthly plane. All of this could be used to provide further evidence in support of ritual interpretations of calendrical cycles or day counts. The Aztec Empire lasted about 1,000 1300 CEE to 1520 CEE. The diviner's path expert for the Aztec diviners is Professor David Carrasco, who is the Neil L. Redenstein Professor of Study of Latin America with a joint appointment at the Harvard Divinity School and the Faculty of Arts and Sciences. Professor Carrasco is a world-renowned expert in history of religion in Mexico, and he has done research and excavations at the site of Teotihuacan. I've probably said that wrong, guys, but this guy sounds awesome. He is an author of numerous books, including The Aztecs, a very short introduction. So we will now be listening to his words on the subject. Let's click it. It looks like he has 2 videos, so we'll listen to both videos. Let's go.
In the Mesoamerican tradition, divination, daily rituals, sacrifices tended to take place within ceremonial centers. Sometimes these were monumental ceremonial centers that were themselves replicas on a smaller scale of the cosmos. This indicates to us that these activities that were taking place on a daily schedule, whether it was eating, whether it was walking, dancing, or trying to read the signs of the future, they were always intimately involved with what these people thought was taking place in the celestial world. And one of the places where we see this relationship between the microcosm of the ceremonial center and its divinations and the macrocosm of the universe and its celestial patterns linked up is in the book known as the Codex Mendoza. The Codex Mendoza is a beautiful codex that was painted in the 1540s, around 1542, by indigenous painters working with Spaniards to present a document that would be sent to the King of Spain. It was set up by the Viceroy Mendoza. That's why it's called the Codex Mendoza. And here we can see the frontispiece of it. And in the frontispiece we see not only an orderly ceremonial center, which is the city. Here you see in 4 parts, inside of these blue lines representing the Lake of Mexico and crossed by blue lines. But within that space, within that symmetrical space, we see all kinds of images representing the way in which the Aztecs themselves tried to understand the present in terms of a past that they felt would spill into the future. For instance, in this particular image, what we see, first of all, is a 51-year calendar that surrounds the entire ceremonial center. This tells us that human space and human action, and especially divination, is always set within the context of a great cycle of time. In this case, even though there's 51 boxes, they represent the 52-year cycle. And each of them has not only a dot which represents a number, 1, 2, 3, 4, but it's a series of symbols, series of signs, temple, rabbit, knife, and reed. And each of these numbers and each of these signs has a meaning in the divination of life. And as we look around the outside of this 52-year cycle, we come to one of the dates, which shows clearly how divination takes place in the Aztec world. It's here at the bottom. It happens to be the date 2 reed, and you'll see that 2 reed has a knot tied across it, and above it is a sign of a fire-making instrument. And this tells us that the Aztecs understood these series of dates here to be the ending of a 52-year cycle, and these over here the beginning of another 52-year cycle. And this particular year was the joining of these 2 celestial cycles. And they called this particular year, or the ceremony that's represented here, the binding of the years. That is the binding of 2 celestial cycles. And here's the point. Human beings on Earth had to participate in this binding of these two great celestial cycles by carrying out certain ritual activities, the binding of the years. And the way they carried this out was by watching a certain star cluster pass across the meridian in the sky at night, and being able to anticipate when it would pass, because if they could read this correctly, this passage of the stars, of the Pleiades, they could then carry out rituals on Earth that would not only satisfy the gods, but set them successfully on the next 52-year cycle of the world. And they had to be able to link up and to be able to understand divine how to link up what would take place in their rituals and what would take place in the sky. So in this, you see immediately the ceremonial center itself is set within this great cycle of years, showing this linkage between the macrocosmos and the microcosmos and the role of ritual in tying these two systems together. So we see in this example of the Codex Mendoza this linkage between the macrocosm and the microcosm through the observation of nature.
Okay, I'm kind of wanting that guy to have a fancier office, just for the record. Okay, so we just listened to that one. Let's hop over to this one next. This is going to be on the Aztec mirrors. Let's learn about Aztec mirrors, guys.
So in Mesoamerican cosmology and its creation stories, which there are many types, there's one theme that really helps us understand divination and prediction practices among the Aztecs and the Maya. And the story goes that in the beginning, as in many paradisical stories, in the beginning there was a period of time where heaven and earth were close together, where the beings who existed could speak to animals, where divinities and humans were almost on the same plane. Our ancestors and divinities were close, and they all had the same powers of seeing, of observing. But in the Mesoamerican case, what happens is the deities, for some reason, they become jealous that the ancestors who are closer to humans.
Oh, this is where they fog the mirror.
Have the same powers that they have. And they decide that they don't like this. And so they create a separation. And the way they create the separation is they cast a spell over the vision, over the eyes of the ancestors, which is described as though a breath on a mirror. And there's still a mirror, but when the ancestors and eventually the humans look into the mirror, they can't see as clearly. They can't see as far into the mirror. They can't see themselves. They can't see the world. And therefore, what happens is that when human beings are created, they inherit this breath over the mirror of their eyes. And they can still see the world that all of us see, but in fact the world is so much more full of life. It's all around that we can't see. And therefore, the divinities can see. They can see inside of trees. They can see inside of our bodies. They can see through mountains. They can see great distances. All things that we cannot do. And so what happens is that certain individuals in the society are born who have a little bit more capacity for vision. And those often become the diviners. They have to undergo training, special training, to take this extra ability to see that moves them a little closer to the ancestors or to the divinities. And they take this training, what we might call shamanistic training, to sharpen this ability. And they're often the ones who can read the signs, who become the diviners. But this idea of the mirror is very important in Mexico, in Mesoamerica, because many of these mirrors were made out of obsidian, this black obsidian stone that was very brittle and very sharp, but could be shined. You could shine it, and when you looked into it, and I've looked into them, you can see yourself. Now, you can't see yourself as clearly as when we look into our mirrors, but you can see yourself, and sometimes you can see things behind you. And so these mirrors become very important for humans as techniques to improve their own ability to see by having these mirrors, it improves, clarifies that breath on the eyes.
Okay, interesting. Kind of like the veil type theory in other religions and stuff like that, but absolutely fascinating. So, we're now to casting lots. Guys, we are freaking ripping through these. Okay, let's do casting lots. Yeah, we're going to totally be knocking through this. Let's get this wrote down. We know we're going to have stuff to write. Okay. Casting lots. How to seek a prediction. Find a specialized or special random device, use it, and interpret the outcome following an associated pre-established predictive system. Any purposeful randomized mechanism could be throwing dice or knuckle bones, turning to a random page of a book, a computer random number generator, etc. Depending on the system, could be anyone, such as with knucklebone tossing, or a trained expert who interpret the random passage in a book, such as with the Gospel of Lots of Mary. I don't know about this Gospel of Lots of Mary. I'm going to tell you, I'm kind of confused on what that is. Let's Google this real quick, just because I want to know what this is. Because we don't like not knowing. Okay. A miniature codex that contains 37 oracles entitled The Gospel of Lots of Mary, according to its inception. Okay. The Gospel of Lots of Mary is a Coptic writing dating to the 5th century, 5th or 6th century, used for divination or bibliomancy. It contains 36 answers to questions. Through the methods for readers to select an answer are unclear. Oh my gosh, I'm going to have to tell one of my friends about this. I'm going to tell you, I did not know about this. Let's write this down. I have a friend that's a Greek Orthodox person, and he's also very into esoteric studies. And he's considering writing a book on Christian mystery schools. And I know that that might sound like something that you guys would be like, oh, Christian mystery schools, is that a thing? There are actually mystery schools within some Christian sects. This I would consider almost a mystery school type thing. He'll be very fascinated by it, right? Casting a lot, also known as sortition, claromancy, or sortilege, is a process used since the beginning of recorded history to divine the future. No matter the physical device used, the idea of casting lots is always the same. Reveal the will of God via human interpretation. So we're going to write down human, and then we're going to write down the word random because we know that it's random, right? No matter the physical device used, the idea of casting lots is always the same. Reveal the will of God via human interpretation of the outcome of a purposely randomized process. Throwing dice is a good modern example of randomized process. The principle being casting lots is each resulting combination will owing to supernatural influence reveal some aspect of a future world. In the video below, Laura Nasrallah demonstrates two types of lot casting, knucklebone tossing and the Gospel of Lots of Mary. Tossing knucklebones, also called astrogalamancy, was the ancient equivalent to throwing dice today, using animal knucklebones with markings analogous to pips on a die added. Predictions based on knucklebone divination start with a practitioner tossing the bones, followed by either the practitioner or an expert diviner looking up the corresponding predetermined prophecy for the value shown on the bones. For example, the Lot Oracle at Kremina, Asia Minor, in modern-day Turkey, dating from 120 CE, was a small limestone monument, about 2.4 meters in height, dedicated to the god Mercury. Inscribed on the side of the monument were 56 possible outcomes that the knucklebone thrower would consult in order to find the answer to questions about the future. And we'll write that down, 56 bones, 56 outcomes. Interesting. There were over 20 stone lot oracles like this in Asia Minor. Evidence astroglamancy dates back to at least 500 BCE in ancient Greece. To use the Gospel of Lots of Mary, a petitioner would flip through the book and randomly pick out a passage of text, also called an oracle. The interpretation of the passage, which was often very vague and general, was up to either the practitioner or to an expert they might consult. While the Gospel of Lots of Mary are specific to early Christianity, this kind of sortation book was also very common in Greco-Roman world, with another popular example being the Sortes Astrophysicae. Well, interesting, good to know. The general concept of casting of lots is one of the most ancient forms of prediction, and it continues to the modern era. The knucklebones Professor Nasrallah describes appear to have been in use from approximately 500 BCE to 500 CE. Divining books like the Sortia Astropsychia were most popular from roughly 100 CE to 500 CE, and Harvard's copy of the Gospel of Lots of Mary dates from approximately 500 CE. Meet the expert, Professor Laura Nasrallah. The Diviner's Guide expert for casting of lots is Professor Laura Nasrallah of the Harvard Divinity School. Professor Nasrallah is an expert in early Christianity and Mediterranean archaeology. Her recent book is Christian Responses to Roman Art and Architecture, the 2nd Century, Amid the Spaces of Empire. She also has a course on edX, Early Christianity, the Letters of Paul. Good for her. Let's watch her video now, right?
People also engaged in divination practices in order to try to figure out how to act in the world. What was the will of the gods, or how were the fates leading them? I want to first offer you a definition to explain something about these divination practices. There's one called cleromancy. Peter van der Horst succinctly defines cleromancy as prognostication, or rather problem solving by means of the drawing of lots or the casting of dice or other randomizing practices. I want to talk to you about 3 different objects, 3 different examples of divination, of sortition practices in the ancient world. The first one is non-Christian. The first example comes from a really beautiful location in modern-day Turkey called Kremna. It's a lot oracle that was built in around the year 120. It was dedicated by a very wealthy family within the town of Kremna. We find their names in Latin at the crown of the monument. It's a 4-sided stele, a little bit taller than I am, made of marble, and carved in Greek with oracles, with divination inscriptions, with explanations of what might happen to you. This wasn't located in some back corner of the city of Kremna. It was located in the governmental center, in the main forum area, and it was embedded within the steps that led up to the Roman Basilica, to the Hall of Judgment there. This lot oracle would work by means of astragaloi. This one is in bronze from the Harvard Art Museum, but originally they're just bones of sheep from the ankle bones, and as you threw them down, they would fall on one side or another, and depending on how they fell, they're like dice. They would have a number associated with them. This stele, located in Kremna, has inscribed on 4 sides a list of the potential falls of 5 different ostragals. And let me read you some of the divinations that you might get as you sat on the steps in the governmental center casting your ostragals, looking for an answer to a question that you might have about what you should do. Of Demeter, everything about which you ask me will be a smooth journey for you and safe. Do not be afraid, for a daimon, a spirit, will lead the way toward everything, and I see nothing painful for you. Go on in a good heart. Or if you got another role, from Poseidon, throwing seeds and writing letters on the ocean are both pointless and a fruitless task. Since you are mortal, do not force the god who will do you some harm. This oracle speaks directly to the petitioner. It deals with predictions that might help with business matters in particular, something we might expect from someone rolling ostragals within the governmental center of the city of Kremna. Lest we think that this is a one-off, a strange oracle only located in one little town in modern-day Turkey, you should know that 21 of these oracles have been found around especially Asia Minor or modern-day Turkey. This was not a unique thing to the city of Kremna. People were using these divination practices and devices to get an answer to their concerns, to manage risk, to deal with uncertainty in their world.
Good to know. She's a good presenter. We like her. Okay, next one. Get ready. Boom. Good morning, by the way, and I hope you're all awesome.
This brings me to my 3rd example of divination in the early Christian period. And this example is an actual early Christian divination book that we have here at Harvard. It dates likely from the 5th or the 6th century. This book is very, very tiny. It measures less than 3 inches in height and in width. It could have fit in the palm of someone's hand. It's made of vellum. It's been tested, and it was sheepskin that was used. And the writing on it is in very fine uncials, a fine handwriting that kind of imitates the handwriting that would have been used for biblical
It's already
text.
touched enough.
It's a text that in its very paleography, in the very script that it uses, claims a kind of authority for itself, a sophisticated style of writing. The text is titled The Gospel of the Lots of Mary. And within it, it contains multiple oracles. And we're not really sure how it would have been used, to tell you the truth. What's clear is that someone held it in their hand. And if you look closely at the text, you can see that it's been well thumbed. The middle of each page is dark with the stains of sweat and dirt from a ritual expert who would have held it and thumbed through the pages, trying to find an answer to the petitioner's questions. We can imagine the possibility that a petitioner in the 5th century or in the 6th century in Egypt, because the text is written in Coptic, the common language in Egypt at that time, that the petitioner would have come to the ritual expert who would have held a text like this in his or her hands and leafed through it to find an answer to the petitioner's troubles. It's a practice not unlike that we found at Kremna, although at Kremna it was a public practice in a public square of throwing the ostragals and trying to find an answer from the god. In this case, we have a practice with a small book, a kind of bibliomancy where a given page would tell you the answer to the question that you held in your heart and that you discussed with the ritual expert about your future. Let me read you the incipit, or the introduction of the text, so that you can have a sense of the concerns that an early Christian might have brought to a ritual expert. The Gospel of the Lots of Mary, the mother of the Lord Jesus Christ, she to whom Gabriel the archangel brought the good news. He who will go forward with his whole heart will obtain what he seeks. Only do not be of 2 minds. The handwriting that looks like a biblical script the reference to Mary, the mother of Jesus Christ, these give a kind of authority to the text, a kind of religious sanction to it. The first oracle reads this way: O human, with their tongues they love you greatly, but their heart is far from you. And you know what happened to you before today, that you almost lost your life. In any case, they certainly lie in wait for you. The oracles in this small little divination device often talk about not fearing, about trusting in God. They give pieces of divine advice for the 5th or the 6th century Egyptian Christian who came to the ritual expert seeking some understanding of what might happen in his or her future, seeking some guidance in his or her path for the present.
That is kind of a neat little book. I'm going to just be honest, guys. Super cool. Okay, we're now to the next type of divination. If you're just joining, by the way, I hope you're having an awesome day and kicking ass on your own. The comets and interpreting comets. There's going to be a test at the end, so I have to have a little bit of stuff. How to seek a prediction. Wait for a comet to appear. Equipment. The naked eye. This is human. And I don't know what we'd add beside that. Any human who attributes meaning to the appearance of a comet. Suddenly and unexpectedly, the apparent perfection and regularity of the heavens are disturbed by an unknown interloper, a comet. For thousands of years, myriad civilizations around the globe saw comets as supernatural signs, sometimes as portents of good news and other times as harbingers of doom. For cultures striving to understand the world around them, the capricious, seemingly random, and we'll write random on there because supposedly they're going to ask us that, unpredictability of comets is what imbued them with meaning. Where else could comets come from if not from the divine? For example, of famous comets in Western history include 44 BCE, an appearance of a comet soon after Julius Caesar's death was taken as a sign that Caesar had become a god. In 12 BCE, the appearance of the Star of Bethlehem during the birth of Jesus is often interpreted as a comet, perhaps Halley's Comet. In 1066 CE, the appearance of Halley's Comet was supposedly a good omen for William the Conqueror and the Norman conquest of England at the Battle of Hastings, or alternatively a bad sign for the defeat of King Harold and his Anglo-Saxons. The change over time in humanity's feeling about comets offers a great example of the same phenomenon taking on very different meanings within the predictive system when we discuss in this course. A framework diagram. We already looked at the framework diagram. Before Newton worked out his predictive theory of gravity, comets were almost universally thought to be a sign from the gods, appearing to be random phenomenon as we mentioned above. Once Edmund Halley made the bold claim using calculations based on Newton's theory that the Great Comet of 1682, now called Halley's Comet, would return 75 years later, and that claim was posthumously verified. Comets were effectively demoted, in some people's view, to being great demonstrations of the near fully deterministic nature of gravity, rather than supernatural messengers. We will have much more to say on this topic in the forthcoming PredictionX mini course, The Path to Newton. A video from this section will be released at a later date. Stay tuned. Okay, good to know. Oh, there's not a video for this section. Comets have been seen as an omen for perhaps as long as human history. A scientific understanding of comets came more into focus around 1687 with the prediction of Newton's Principia, as well as work being done by Halley at the same time, which culminated in the successful prediction of the return of Halley's Comet in 1758. Meet the expert John Overholt, Owen Gingerich, and Sarah Schneider. I don't know how to say this. Schishner? We'll go with Schishner. The diviner expert guides for comets are John Overholt, Professor Owen Gingerich, and Dr. Sarah Schishner. John Overholt is the curator of the Donald and Mary Hyde collection of Dr. Samuel Johnson and earlier modern books and manuscripts at Harvard University's Houghton Library. You can follow him on Twitter at John Overholt. Professor Gingerich is a professor emeritus of astronomy and history of science at Harvard, where he has taught for nearly 50 years. He is one of the world's experts in Jonas Kepler and Nicholas Copernicus, who has wrote a best-selling book about the book nobody read, Chasing the Revolution of Nicholas Copernicus. Dr. Sarah Schishner, I don't know how to say her name, is the David P. Wheatland Curator of the Collection of Historical Scientific Instruments at Harvard University. Her research is on the study of the history of science with a focus on material culture and astronomy. She is also the co-author of Tangible Things Making History Through Objects, which is also a course on edX. Good to know. Awesome for them. Wish they would have made us a video for that section. That was a very short section. Let's click to the next one. Egyptian statues. We're not paying for this course. We're just doing the whole free, hey, let's learn. We don't want to pay for stuff. I know, right? I take too many classes and do too many random things to pay for all of it. And thank God they give you the option of auditing classes for free on this. You can pay for these courses, guys, and if you want to, I'd encourage you to do it. If you want the certificate, you want to be able to put something up on your wall, that's awesome. I'm not going to talk crap about it. I think it's pretty neat. How to seek a prediction. Seek out a priest and wait for one to arrive, likely by boat. Last time a priest arrived by boat in my area is not in my lifetime, but that's interesting. Equipment, special statues, possibly with movable head for nodding. Okay. Priest trained in decreeing oracles. This sounds like a naughty thing where he has a mechanical statue and if he likes what it says, he just hits the button right. Oracles appear, or maybe you could use a bobblehead to do this. Like, you know, if the bauble bobbles a certain way, it means certain things. I don't know. Oracles appear relatively late in long span of Egyptian history. The first representation of a sacred boat containing an oracular statue of a god Amon dates to nearly to the early New Kingdom reign of Amenhotep around 1525 BCE. While there are some early textual references, neither the Old Kingdom Pyramid Age around 2686 through 2181 BCE, nor the Middle Kingdom Age of the Great Egyptian Literature around 2055 through 1650 BCE, seem to place much reliance on decrees from oracles. It is New Kingdom and the following third intermediary period around 1069 through 664 BCE, and the late period around about 664 through 332 BCE, where we find the most frequent mentions of oracle decisions, both royal and private. There was no single god responsible for all oracle decrees. The Egyptians appealed to many forms of the god Amun, Amun-Re, and other deities, state and local. Even the deified king Amenhotep, deified king. Sorry, guys. I consulted by many residents. Oh, Amenhotep the First was consulted by many residents of Thebes. Throughout Egyptian history, we see an ebb and flow in perceptions of the divine nature of the pharaohs. At times, the populace sorry, guys, let me get my breath. At times, the populace relied upon the king and pharaonic court system. At other times, direct appeals to the god for assistance were far more common. Methods included approaching the statue of the gods, borne in his sacred bark upon the shoulders of a priest, during festival processions, or people could submit yea or nay inscriptions to the deity for a definitive decision. The bark or statue would walk forward, yes, and backward, no. Sometimes scholars believe that the nodding indicated that certain statues had moving parts, manipulated by the priest. I think that's true too, making this a potential very human influenced divination, and I agree. Let me get that written down. Okay. As far as selecting the next pharaoh was concerned, both Thutmose III and Ramses IV separately recounted how the god Amun persuaded the hall of Karnak Temple, Thebes, in his bark before setting in front of the chosen prince before all the country or courtiers. Oracle decisions came down on matters both large and small. In the case of royalty, the gods might bestow his blessing on the legitimacy of a pharaoh, or the decision to mount a military campaign, or the best route for a trade expedition. For the elites and common people, advice was sought on whether goods and services had been adequately paid for, whether a promotion was likely, or if a neighbor had encroached upon one's farmland after the water of the annual Nile flood had obscured the field boundaries. Since the king was the one responsible for ordering the inscriptions of the oracle's decision on the temple walls or papyrus document, it is extremely unlikely he would have ever recorded a decision that went against him. Perhaps the closest we come to the decision running contrary to the pharaoh's preferences is the magical tale of King Khufu and the magicians, Papyrus Westcar, writing during the Middle Kingdom. The last part of the text seems to foretell the end of Khufu's line, 4th dynasty, Old Kingdom, and the rise of a new king who would form the 5th dynasty. Upon hearing the news, the king fell into sadness of heart. Oh, he got bummed out from that. That makes sense, I guess, right? Okay. The divine... Oh, wait. Timeline. The first recorded Egyptian dynasty is around 3150 BCE, and the last dynasty ended in 300 BCE, with some form of priests or diviners consulting the ruling class almost continuously throughout this time. Meet the expert, Professor Peter der Manuelen. The diviner's guide expert on Egyptian divination is Professor Peter der Manuelin, I don't know, of the Department of Near East Languages and Civilizations at Harvard. Professor Manuelin is the Philip J. King Professor of Egyptology and also the director of Harvard Semitic Museum. He is the founding director of the Giza Archive, which aims to collect all information, including detailed 3D representations about digs and excavation at Giza, the home of the pyramids. Okay, let's listen to his thing. I'll bet he's interesting. We would think so, right? I'm hoping so.
So how did the gods appear? How did they
Oh, this
provide
is
these
neat.
predictions and these oracles? Well, for the average Egyptian, they would have to wait until the statue of the god was brought out of the temple. So inside the sanctuary at Karnak and many other places, there was a statue of the god that had to be ritually clothed and ritually fed every day by the priests. And then on certain festival days, the statue was placed inside a bark or a sacred boat and hoisted up on the shoulders of the priests and marched out of the temple. And it's at that point, when this statue was brought across the river, visiting other shrines and other temples, there would be parades on either side of the Nile. This was the beautiful festival of the valley, or the festival of Opet. And this is when individuals might approach with a petition. Yay or nay? Am I in good shape? Has someone stolen from me? What about this cow that I bought? Have I paid on the installment plan correctly, or is someone throwing an accusation at me? What should I do? All kinds of questions would come. So how would the god indicate what the right thing to do was? The hieroglyphs talk about nodding in approval or disapproval. And there's some disagreement about whether the statues actually had some moving parts and might.
Do we
invoke
not
the
have one of these
head a little bit.
statues?
That is probably unlikely. More likely is that the statue in its bark would be brought by the priest either forward to say yes, or backwards to say no, or perhaps lean to one side or another if there are two competing petitions brought. And this is how the god would signal approval or disapproval. And of course, I can't help wondering about corruption, because all you need to do is bribe these priests who are holding the bark and holding the statue to lean to one side or the other to favor one case.
I'm on this
against
guy's
another
side on the
case, of
corruption
course.
part.
So oracles and predictions, the individuals, the populace in Luxor or ancient Thebes would be approaching the god with very, very high hopes to get the results that they desire. The kings would be petitioning in a much more private way, of course, and these outcomes would be recorded for all time in their temple inscriptions to show that, yes, they are the divinely born next rulers on the throne. They are on the throne with all legitimacy, or the decisions they made for this expedition or that campaign were absolutely justified. So it's a good backup system to bolster your kingship.
Okay. I feel that that is more of was used for propaganda within their thing. Okay, we have already read this whole section on Horosby. I'm going to reread it, because if you guys just joined, you guys didn't realize that I jumped ahead not knowing that they were going to recover things, and I didn't know what this was. So I'm like, oh, what's that? Let me go look at that. And then all of a sudden we found out, hey, holy crap. We also learned about Romans learning about, birds. Did you guys know that the Romans interpreted a lot of predictions based on birds? I know, right? Random thing to know. It's random, so it worked for them, I guess. Let's take notes this time, though. Okay. Horace Spicy. How to seek a prediction. Consult a trained expert, either as royalty or as a commoner who paid with a sacrificial sheep. Equipment, instrument to sacrifice a sheep and extract its liver. Clay tablets with divination instructions manual. The people of ancient Mesopotamia believed their futures to be largely predetermined by gods. Over thousands of years, that Babylon, Acadia, Samaria, and other Mesopotamian cultures thrived. Their priests and astrologers developed ever more sophisticated methods appearing into the predetermined futures. One of the most noteworthy of these predictive systems was horospicy, divination by means of inspecting animal entrails. The animals, often sheep, were sacrificed in ceremony where the sun gods could influence the appearance of the exta, or entrails. For a handsome fee, trained diviners called Beru or horospecs could answer a current yes or no question by looking for the sun god's answer in the entrails. Presumably, some features of the entrails were purely natural, and some were caused by random mutation. And so we'll call this random in there because I don't think that they knew what was going to be in there when they opened them up. But all of the interpretations by human, blah, 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 expert horospec. Horospicy, also known as extispicy, in various forms, goes back to at least the 3rd millennium BCE, and it is still practiced in some parts of the world today. Mesopotamians were also great observers of deterministic sky, deeply interested in astrology. Often both horospexy and astrology were asked for predictions about the same question, and there may be interesting intersections among these predictive traditions. Training for horospecs would have been highly specialized, and the actual process of divining was very elaborate. By the time of Barutu, or Art of the Diviner Manual for Extispicy, was published, copies known date back to about 600 BCE and earlier. It took up 135 clay tablets written as 60 lines of cuneiform each. Like a modern medical manual, the Barutu and earlier simpler instructions often inscribed on clay models, often organs, typically sheep's liver, detailed various conditions that the diviner might find on extracted organs, indicating which of these conditions were positive, auspicious, or negative, inauspicious. A horospex examining an organ's features would add up the positives against the negative signs, and depending on which of the two prevailed, he would judge the reading to be either favorable or unfavorable. But that was often not the end of the procedure, since it is unlikely that an extispicy would ever yield 100% positive or negative results. A diviner might perform a second extispicy to reduce uncertainty. In this sense, the Baru acted like a modern scientist, seeking to replicate the results of an early experiment to assure veracity. Horospicy has horospicy has unusual importance in PredictionX, as the Barutu menu mentioned above actually contains some purely theoretical predictions, in that they refer to anatomical oddities that had never been observed. In much the same way, Isaac Newton's theory of gravity can predict the behavior of moving objects without any observations of prior similar circumstances. As will be explained in more detail in the Path of Newton featured within Part 2 of PredictionX, Newton's theory of gravity was the culmination of a history that began with observation of the skies, continued on recording of the observations, then the empirical theories that explained and predicted what observed, e.g. Kepler's law, and then finally on to a truly predictive theory, Newton's. Evidence of Mesopotamian horospicy dates back to at least 2000 BCE, and it appears to have been popular in the Roman Empire through at least 100 CE. Meet the expert, Dr. Piotr Steinkeller. I'm sure I said that wrong. Piotr Steinkeller is the professor of Assyriology in the Department of Near East Language and Civilizations at Harvard University. Professor Steinkeller's work focuses on history, culture, and languages of Mesopotamia from about 3000 BCE to 1500 BCE. He is also actively involved in the archaeological projects at the site of Tel Abrid, a Bronze Age settlement dating back to about 2900 BCE. This guy should be interesting. We've got 3 videos and way more stuff on his background. I don't really think that we need to know that much about his scholarly background, but we'll probably hit up that bonus stuff right there. I'm glad he has a giant background. Good for him, right?
Welcome, I'm Piotr Steinkeller. I teach Assyriology and ancient Mesopotamian history and religion at Harvard. And today I would like to share with you a very special cuneiform tablet which belongs to the collection of the Harvard Semitic Museum. It is one of the most important cuneiform tablets in our collection. It dates roughly to 1700 BCE, the reign of the great Hammurabi of Babylon. It is written in the Akkadian language. What makes this tablet so unique? It is a manual of the divination priest called Baru in Akkadian. Another term for him is Haruspex, and he was a specialist, ritual specialist, who foretold future from the appearance of sheep's intestines. The tablet contains 142 lines. This is what we call the front side or the obverse. Okay, so this is the beginning of the tablet here. I would like to point out that the scribe is incredibly small and tiny. It's quite unusual in that way. So we have probably something like 60 lines over the front or the obverse, and then the tablet continues on the back or the reverse of the tablet up to here. The manual tells the diviner what he may find in the extra, and how he should analyze the extra. The text begins with ritual instructions for the diviner, which instruct him how he should invite the gods to the extispicy, and the central figure here is the sun god, and how he may ask the gods to obtain a favorable answer to his query. So he should offer offerings, prepare offerings, say some prayers, and then he should sacrifice a sheep. Having slaughtered the sheep, he then should ask the sun god and other gods for a positive answer, and they are supposed to inscribe the answer in the entrails of the sacrificial sheep.
Interesting. I'm going to tell you, it would be super neat to be able to read that kind of stuff. Let's get on to the next video. I'm just going to be honest. I don't speak Akkadian. I don't know how to read it. But, man, that was a neat little stone. That language looks awesome.
Well, you come with a specific question, and then you present it to the god, and then the answer, but he still needs to analyze over the sheep and then add up all the positive against the negative features, yes. And depending on that, he will say whether this is yes or no, or positive or negative, yes. But then there is still some doubt, therefore he would need to do another extispicy. He sacrifices another sheep, goes again through the same steps, and only if the second sheep corroborates what he had found earlier, then he can be certain, and that's the answer he would give to the client, which would be formulated as a yes or no answer. For example, if he the question was whether I should go on a business trip, then he will tell him, well, you shouldn't or you should. And that's how it worked. And we have hundreds of recorded queries, for example, sent to the Assyrian kings with very specific questions about battles and should I travel on that day and so on. And in each case, they would go through this procedure involving also this control XTSPC. And here I also want to stress that this is completely devoid of any mumbo-jumbo supernatural features. Yes, that's I compared these, I think earlier, at least in the earlier version of it, to the modern manuals used in medical autopsies. This whole part is purely science. It's this sort of very detailed descriptions of extent. There is nothing supernatural.
Okay, good to know. Click the next one.
And again, another point I want to stress is that one should distinguish within Babylonian XTSPC between the practical XTSPC and theoretical XTSPC. What I described now, including this manual, that's part of the practical XTSPC. That's how it worked in daily life. And we know that the same procedure was followed until the very end of cuneiform civilization. Neo-Babylonian times, Nabonidus, Assyrian kings, we have reports written for them exactly in this form, yes. And then there is a completely different issue that's theoretical XTSPC. And that's when they begin recording this information on tablets. But first, of course, they started producing clay models of particular configurations of extant, probably of exceptional occurrences, when a king had died under very strange conditions. Yes. These events were so extraordinary, they began collecting such cases, really. And these were, at this stage, I would think, real observations of actual happenings. Yes. At some later point, 100 years later perhaps, they began adding short inscriptions identifying, telling you what it was. Before you couldn't, unless you remember it, of course, you couldn't connect it with any event. And then they switched to and this is what I described again in to introduce sort of conditional clauses. They again use this very specific illustration, yes, like the photograph of this particular case, and they would say, if in the future a king will die, that's what the extra will look like. Okay. Now I would like to show a few examples of such inscribed liver models. The first one comes from Mari on the Euphrates. It dates roughly to the 19th century BC and has a 3-line inscription which reads as follows. This is the liver of Kish concerning King Sargon, and the king mentioned here is of course the famous Sargon of Akkad, who lived around 2300 BC and was the founder of the First World Empire. And this omen apparently refers to his conquest of Kish. Here we have another river model. This one is of unknown provenance. It probably dates to roughly 1900, 1800 BCE, and it has a longer inscription which reads as follows. This liver concerns King Sinidinam, to whom something happened at the time when in the temple of Shamash he participated in a religious festival. and the last three lines of the inscription specify a prediction which apparently also occurred at the time. The text reads, I quote, "The person for whom the extispy is performed will defeat his enemy and will trample over the enemy." And this particular ruler is known to have ruled in Larsa, in southern Babylonia, in the middle of the 19th century BC.
That's
Here
such a
have yet
neat
another,
language. I don't
clay model,
know
but
how
this
the
time
hell they
of
read
a
that.
lung.
It looks so
While
complicated.
most of such models represented livers, you also have models showing lungs and other anatomical parts. And this one, which comes from collection of the Yale University, shows a lung with a characteristic perforation. And as you can see, it's also inscribed.
Okay. So they also read some lungs. So obviously this is the guy's background. He has a deep background. Honestly, that's awesome for him. I think that's cool. He seems like a cool guy. Might not be the life of a party, but probably be
And
interesting
finally,
to visit with.
They no longer use N or Joe extra, but they can say, I mean, that's the classical form. If the extra look like this, then a king will die. Okay, and then we have these enormous, we find collections of omens, and some of them contain thousands of entries, but most of the stuff is completely artificial, because by use of the so-called generative rules, you can create new omens ad infinitum. You no longer have to go and collect data, and it's just you generate new omens. For example, the example I cited, there is a anatomical part on the liver called the gate. Okay. So first of all, you can duplicate the number of gates. You have 2 gates, 3 gates, 4 gates, 5. Completely. I mean, these are completely unrealistic situations, because you expect 10 gates. Yes, but that's what they do. Okay. And then depending on whether the gate is on the left, on the right, again you produce new meanings, and then numbers, of course, will have also negative, positive values attached to them. Yes. So if you have a few rules, then you create a great number of new possibilities. Yes. Now I would like to show 2 examples of theoretical omens. These are 2 tablets from the collection of Yale. They're of quite large size. The larger tablet probably records close to 100 individual omens, and then we have a smaller tablet with probably 50 omens altogether. These tablets date roughly to 1700 BCE, and this practice continued into the first millennium, and eventually such collections of theoretical omens would become enormous. Some of the series numbered over 100 tablets, and the number of omens ran into thousands, and this type of scholarship became very popular during the first millennium BC, especially in the Neo-Assyrian period.
Okay. And that takes us through that section. Boom. We're freaking killing this, guys. What are we at now? Ifa divination. I don't know anything about Ifa divination. I'm going to just tell you guys the truth. That's Ifa divination. Okay, how to seek a prediction. Consult an Ifa diviner. Okay. Special bowl like tray or set of palm nuts to use as markers. Personnel, an Ifa diviner with at least 15 years of training, having memorized all the passages of the Odu, to interpret Ifa device outcomes. Ifa diviner is practiced by Yoruba people of southwest Nigeria and Africa. The exact origin of Ifa divination is unknown, but appears to predate Christianity and Islam in West Africa and continues to be an important part of Yoruba culture in Nigeria and for Africans in America. I've never heard of this before, but interesting. For the more than 50 million Yoruba people who live in Nigeria and around the globe, the world, Io, is governed and controlled by numerous Orisa, who inhabit the world but have access to the habits and occurrences of the upper world, Oru, Oron, heaven, and the underworld, Li, or Oronomelia. I don't know what that is. The god of divination is regarded as one of the numerous deities, and Ifa is his divination process. The occurrences, events, and activities are revealed to humans through the elaborate divination process of Ifa. Through Ifa, the rule of the diviner, known as the Babalawo, is to help the individual or community to see what is in store for them in their day-to-day lives. The training to become a Babalawo is an intense process. There are, principle, 256 chapters in the divination process called Odu. Each one contains elaborative narratives of the mythic stories related to history, events, ritual practices, etc. Importantly, the Urdu is an oral tradition, and thus the Babalawo is training must memorize all or most of the 256 Odu in order to be qualified to be a Babalawo. A divination session between the Babalawo and the inquirer involves paying homage to the Oronomelia and the other ancestral Babalawos who had performed successful divination in the past, saluting the principal powers of the cosmos, invoking the mystical mother, without whose help the ritual will not be effectuous. Then the diviner engages in the inquiry, who takes a coin or paper, touches his forehead, whispers his or her prayers, and requests and asks the secrets behind the problems to be revealed, along with the appropriate solution. Next, the diviner takes palm nuts from a divination bowl, tries to grab from his other hand most of the palm nuts, and then with the remaining one or two palm nuts marks the results of his activities in the powder in the divination tray. See the video for an example of the process. We will, by the way. This process is then repeated until the diviner can make 4 sides of the divination can make 4 sides on the divination tray. The results of this randomized process, and we'll write randomized, and human. Okay. The result of this randomized process is the Adu divination sign that the Babalawo then recites. The client listens and interprets, and then the Babalawo gives a solution, sometimes a consensus. I apologize, guys. It's still barely after 5. Sometimes a consensus is reached in which the Babalawo and client agree to do another session in order to determine if they got an exactly correct answer. The process clearly relies plenty on human interactions, as well as the randomized patterns seen in the palm nuts in the Ifa bowl. Evidence for Ifa divination goes back to at least 100 CE, and it remains an active and important part of Urobo communities today. Meet the expert. Professor Jacob Alapana is the professor of African religious traditions at Harvard. His book, City of 201 Gods, is a definitive guide to understanding the Yoruba tradition and how it spread from Africa to the rest of the world. Professor Alapana has received the prestigious Nigerian National Order of Merit for his work. Prepare yourselves. We're about to learn how this works.
In this section, we also have Professor Tayo Adishina in the Department of History at the University of Ibadan. Is the one helping us with the camera. And then we have Dr. Jegede, who is a specialist in indigenous medicine and Ifa divination process, who teaches in the Institute of African Studies at the University of Ibadan. Now we have the Babalawo, who is the one who has come to do the divination section for us, and he is our Fayemi Babalawo Fayemi Abidemi. Like I said before, I met him a few years ago when we had a conference here on this campus. And then, of course, we have with him two... Yanifa Fabukola Adeshakin, and a client, Yetunde Ajayi. So the whole section, I think, I would say, is made up of the people here present. Thank you very much.
Okay, let's see this.
This is a divination section. We are in the city of Ibadan, and we have come to do this recording with a Babalawo, a diviner. Incidentally, I just realized that he took part in one of the conferences I held here on interfaith dialogue and HIV AIDS. So he was quite
well, he's choosing how many he grabs.
So let's now see what the typical section is.
Ifá ọgbọ́ ohun tí aláníyàn ìbọn ẹ sọ ọ̀run làbára àgbọn mi nìkún bọ́lá jókòó ọmọ ẹni tí fún búlù lálọ ọ̀run làbára àgbọn mi fún àkókò lókun ọ̀dọ́dọ́ àṣẹ̀lúdọ̀rọ̀ ọgbọ́n tí aláníyàn ìbọn ẹ sọ báyìí ọ̀run làbára àgbọn mi fún ẹgbọ́n tí ó sọ fún yín o iwájú ọpọ́n awo níyìn lónìí o ẹ̀yìn ọpọ́n awo níyìn lónìí olùmúlọ̀tún ọlọ́kan lósì àárín ọpọ́n ìtọ́run ilẹ̀. Ògúndáre yìí ògúndá kan ojú wa wá ajé ojú àmọ́ alájé adéwáfún ní ẹrú òòsà abùfáì ní ẹrú òòsà ẹbọ wọn ní kí wọn máa ṣe àìní nìkan níbẹ̀ lẹ́yìn tí ń ṣẹbọ alóòsà lápẹ̀lẹ́ o. Ẹbọ ló kú báyìí o tí aládèéyà yìí tó rú ẹbọ sí Ọ̀rúnmìlà àkórú ní ká sí ẹbọ ẹ̀.
Dr. Jegede,
yes, sir.
Would you like to comment on some of the things? some of the translations, some of the ideas, and some of the concepts?
Well, some translation would be
Yes,
good.
This is an inquiry into the mind of a client who has specific problem that needed specific solution. And the IFA as a divination system is an established mechanism through which complex issues are dissected and looked into or are investigated. So the client really did not or should not expose his or her mind to the Babalawo before the divination sessions. So she has to speak quietly into the money and the sacred Ifa kernel. And so the Babalawo now has the responsibilities to dig into the mind of the client, and in the process of making rigorous inquiry, what makes him a professional or a well-trained person is not just the rendition of Juju or the oration of the language, but the ability to hit the exact problem that the client had complained about. In this audio, the audio that came out is Ogbe Yeku. Ogbe on the right and Yeku on the left. Many times, there could be a way by which the appearance of the audio itself explains itself very directly. The Ogbe Yeku area, Ogbe actually would mean that Yeku means that there is an effort to push death away. That is, Ogbe becomes the shield that is going to take the responsibility of pushing away the impending death. So because Yeku now is close to Ogbe, Ogbe will be helping to shield the Yeku.
I'm going to be honest, I'm having to read the side thing because I can barely understand this guy.
The way the Babalawo explained or did the rendition showed clearly that the client had a kind of problem that could lead to death. But coming to do divination this time around, and if she's going to do the required sacrifice and the rituals, the death will be removed from her, and then she will escape definitely the impending death. And I am particularly fascinated by the opportunity if I force the client to be able to attract all blessings unto herself, even without making any effort. That's quite remarkable. He used the example of a lion who will urinate on a circle, and by that, all kinds of animals come around for him to eat. And these are quite interesting.
Yeah. There are obviously quite a number of metaphors that are involved in the divination process. The way he interpreted the relationship between Ogbe and Oyeku is interesting in the context of this divination, whereby in the context, Oyeku as a mythic figure became the one who had come to Ogbe, the diviner, to consult divination. And then through the process, Ogbe was able to determine what was wrong with Oyeku. And in the recitation of Ifa, where he suggests that one should not be too picky about things, one should be trusting, and that Ogbe did not trust Oyeku, the diviner. And so when it came to a hair point, Ogbe, the master diviner, decided that he will reveal to the client, Oyeku, what has been doing to protect him. So he then revealed to him he made the reference to the Ajogun, the evil forces that he has been preventing from devouring him. That was almost a very interesting drama. And yet, the entire reference refers to the divination that came up, which is called Ubeyeku. So that's also very, very interesting and fascinating to me. Now, can you comment on the sacrifice?
What sacrifice?
Because
I didn't see that.
after, shall we say that after he had pretended that the sacrifice had been performed, then he had to do the divination again to ensure that is the proper sacrifice and that the sacrifice has come to pass. I mean, it's accepted, right?
Yes.
Can you comment on that?
Part of the process of inquiry is to, is to validate the exact elements that will be used for sacrifice. By implication, the Babalawo has no right to suggest, or to speculate, or to be a conjecture, or assume that this will be used or what. It is the division procedures that must dictate exactly what should be used as sacrifice. And in this instance, the father didn't ask for too much.
Oh, so the money
Also straight.
is the money
He did not ask
acceptable?
for money that whatever amount is able to offer, and that will be the required sacrifice.
So this
But another aspect that I think he needed to do was to ask the client. Like if I will man pay for me, I don't know how to say it. I expected that you should ask the client what's the issues, so that eventually the true Babalawo is the client. Yeah. So because he knows what she has come for.
Yeah.
So she has to, the Babalawo must be able to reconcile his recitations with the mind of the client.
Yes. That's fascinating. What would be the main difference between the use of Iki, which is what we have used, and the use of Opele? What would be the main? Is it that the Opele is going?
I'm going to be honest, no idea what he's talking about half the time here.
There's no
difference.
Because I think the Opele is faster than the Iki.
Okay.
The process of the Opele is very faster than
easier.
It's easier.
So there's no difference.
So it's not the true
or the validity
1, 2, 1, 2, 1. So by using the Iki, before the Babalawo will use Iki, they think the Iki is the Okeyikpori of a particular person.
Okay.
That is why it is being used by Babalawo who are the initiated. That is the difference.
Okay.
The client can come and we can bring Opele anyway.
Okay.
And that's where Opele is portable, is moving.
Yeah, you're right.
You can just be taking it anyway.
But there are only certain Babalas who can use Iki.
Yes, they are particularly from people of Ijebu and Abeokuta. It is been their culture to use the Iki.
Actually, by my experience, sir, in Ijebu land, it is a taboo to use Opele.
Is that right?
Yes, and why? Because they think Iki has a superior authority as far as the validity of the divination result is concerned.
Okay.
So it is Iki is superior to Opele.
That's it. That's interesting.
Okay.
All right. Eshe, thank you very
That
much.
cleared up not as much as you guys would have thought, except we know that they offer some kind of, hey, any kind of sacrifice works. Let's click to the next section. Mayan space-time. Did I not see this? That's that guy's history, a deeper background. Okay. I'm going to read through this. Whew. Let's add this to our list of stuff. Maya space time. How to seek a prediction: visit a priest, calendar expert. Mayan calendar, priest trained in interpreting meaning of dates. The Mayan civilization of southern Mexico, Guatemala, Belize, and western Honduras developed as early as 2000 BCE, but major kingdoms rose and fell between 300 BCE and 1500 and 1250 BCE. Though even the classic Maya 250 through 900 CE, cities were never part of a unified empire like the 1500th century Aztecs. Rather, Maya kingdoms formed alliances and regional states, city-states that competed and cooperated with each other over the course of nearly 3 millennia. In Mayan belief, supernatural beings had the power to intervene in human affairs on Earth. Only certain humans were able to interact directly with the upper and lower spirit world and forces, and these individuals were either royalty or who served as intermediaries between gods and humans, or specially trained priests and other ritual specialists with appropriate knowledge, tools, and ancestry. One way the Maya attempted to understand the will of gods was through astronomy. Astronomers, priests, recorded their observations of the moments of a celestial body and other sky events and their calendar dates over extended periods of time in bark paper and deerskin books called codices that were passed down over centuries. Over time, these evolved from observations of dates to theories of the form of astrological tables, designed to allow priests to predict future similar events. The priests would then link the occurrence of an astronomical event with a terrestrial event. E.g., the eclipse occurred around the time of a king's death, and used these connections to help predict what the gods had in store for them when the next astronomical event of that type occurred again. The Mayan system's reliance on celestial phenomenon is reminiscent of the purely astrological predictive system popular today in the deterministic motion of celestial bodies and humans. Bodies linked into otherwise human interpretation. So we're going to write deterministic human. Okay. Meet the expert. The diviner guide expert on Mayan is Dr. Dalen Clark. Dr. Clark got his PhD in anthropology at Harvard, where he studied under Dr. David Carrasco. Dr. Clark's research into Maya culture and has gone on numerous excavations to the port area of Isles Cerritos in Yucatan, Mexico, in order to better understand Mayan life there from 800 to 1250 CE. Dr. Clark is an adjunct assistant professor of anthropology at University of North Carolina, Asheville, and he was also a teaching fellow for PredictionX. Dalen's contributions to helping develop this course were numerous, and we are greatly in his debt. Okay, let's listen to his stuff.
In this class, we've been talking with Professor Carrasco about the Aztec and the way in which they viewed different omens, such as comets, that were later interpreted as being related to the Spanish conquest. From an anthropological perspective, we have to keep in mind that the way in which people understand the world around them, including astronomy, is very much contingent on culture. The way we see and interpret constellations, or how we interpret the sun and the sun's movement in the sky, can be very different depending on the culture that we are a part of. There's actually a specialization within anthropology which studies the astronomy of different cultures. In all Native American societies, the study of the sky was very important. comets, moon phases, equinoxes, and solstices, all of these were significant. Eclipses were significant signs of political upheaval for the Mesoamericans. Venus appears as one of the brightest stars in the sky, especially in the tropics. So Venus and the observation of its movement across the sky was very important for both the Aztecs and especially the Maya, and the Pleiades as well. In our culture, we don't really perceive this star group as much. But for the ancient Mesoamericans, this constellation was called the marketplace and was particularly significant. It's really all about how different cultures understand the universe and their place within it. In pre-Columbian Mesoamerica, they saw the universe as being structured hierarchically in layers. There were 13 layers of the heavens and 9 layers of the underworld, and the Earth actually fit in both the upper and the lower layers. Within the 13 layers of the heavens, different celestial bodies occupy different layers. So for example, the sun had its own layer, while Venus, the moon, and the clouds were each in different layers. Each of these levels was associated with a different god, supernatural beings, forces, and even colors. This is a very different conceptualization of the way in which the universe was structured than, for example, the Western European idea that the universe is conceived as orbital or spherical. The Maya were not interested in what planets, stars, or moons were revolving around which. They were observing how things were moving in each of the 4 cardinal directions of the sky, as well as up and down, the rising and the setting. They were most interested in what we call horizon events, and also in zenith passages straight overhead. We have to understand this as naked eye astronomy. The Maya didn't have telescopes to look at some of these celestial bodies. Instead, they viewed the movements of the stars and the planets using landmarks, such as mountains or the sea. For the Maya, these movements paralleled the natural cycles occurring in all parts of life, including mythology. In this sense, astronomical events were the physical manifestations of gods, eternal mythological events or actions that played out in the spirit world. Rising and setting events and the change in the position of these events represented the battles or fundamental opposing forces or tensions between supernatural forces. Gods would rise, conquer, and then fall, as would kings on the earthly plane. Maya scribes carefully recorded the calendar dates of important historical events, such as the lives of kings, wars, marriages, and rituals, correlating them with natural cycles observed by astronomers and diviners. They even constructed buildings that were designed as observatories to more accurately cite the appearance, disappearance, and movement of stars across the plane of the sky. These were also temples for the veneration of the deities that were associated with these celestial bodies. Even more vital was the question of how human activities in the earthly plane would ensure that these necessary universal cycles continued. And all of this relates, of course, to the calendar.
I'm going to be honest, that little gear calendar that they have is fascinating. Let's go to the next one.
We've been talking in this class with Professor Carrasco about how divination for the Aztecs was very much about the calendar. The Maya were also very, very interested in the movement of time and in connecting the calendars up to larger cycles of time. Astrological beliefs were attached to each of the days within the ritual calendar. In some ways, for the Maya, divination is really a question of numerology. They're looking for the relationships between the 365-day solar calendar and a 260-day divinatory calendar, and the number of days of agricultural cycles, political events, rituals, and various types of celestial movements. They're seeking the intersections that tie all of these different numerical groups of days together. In this way, the cosmos was connected to all of the events that were also taking place on the Earth plane. In addition to the 260-day and 365-day calendars, the Maya also recorded dates in what we call the long count. This was a count of the number of days and groups of days from a specific starting 0 date. As time rolled on, this was like a continuously revolving odometer, where the number of days would shift into larger periods. When one period ended, another would begin. When numerical patterns of days for the movements of celestial bodies corresponded to the calendrical periods and the long count, the Maya believed this was very significant. December 20th, 2012 AD in our calendar, for example, was a period-ending date in the Maya calendar. It wasn't the end of the world, but the flipping over of the odometer. A large group of days ended and a new, larger one began. It is meaningful only in the context of all the other cyclical changes that were taking place on Earth, and the upper world and underworld layers that correlated with it. The changing of the long count was like the year 1999 on our calendar, a cultural reference point, but not the end of time.
Okay. I remember when everybody thought the end of the world was going to happen, right? Okay, let's look at this deeper background part. It doesn't look too long. Like other Mesoamerican cultures, the ancient Mayan were very interested in the passage of time, and their calendars organized time in interrelated cycles of days, including 260-day ritual calendar and the 360 plus 5-day agricultural solar calendar, both common to all Mesoamerican cultures, and the long count, which was like a running odometer. I think he just told us this. Okay, you know what? We'll read through it anyway, just in case. In running calendar, especially the 260-day ritual calendar, were key tools in Mayan divination, which involves the prognostication of future events and interpretation of deep universal meaning in past events, as well as the fate of individuals born on certain days, signs, numbers, cylindrical combinations. The Mayans believed that above the earth were 13 levels of upper world, and below were 9 levels of the underworld, where various gods and supernatural forces existed and interacted with each other with the earthly plane. While supernatural beings had power to intervene in human affairs on earth, only certain humans were able to interact directly with the upper and lower spiritual world and forces. And these individuals were either royalty who served as intermediaries between gods and humans, or specially trained priests or other ritual specialists with the appropriate knowledge, tools, and ancestry. They were placed on earth for which humans could see or experience things happening in the upper and underworlds, such as bodies of water or caves that were entrances to the underworld, or sky in which the different levels could be observed in the clouds, and various celestial bodies, including stars, planets, the moons, eclipses, comets, and meteors. Thus, naked astronomical observations were very important in Mayan society because the perceived movement of these entities across the horizon and vertical planes of the sky, i.e., across the elliptical, represented physical manifestations of the gods, eternal mythological events and actions played out in the spiritual world that impacted human lives on Earth in various ways. Astronomer priests recorded the observations and movements of celestial bodies and other sky events, their calendar dates over extended periods of time in bark, paper, and deerskin called codices that were passed down over centuries. Over time, these evolved from observations of dates to the theory in the form of astronomical tablets designed to allow priests to predict future similar events, and some of these tools proved to be quite accurate, while others were less reliable. Either way, the point was not so much to predict future events, but to seek points of connection or overlaps between the cycles of time in the calendar. Astronomical events, weather patterns, natural disasters on Earth, or historical events of kingdoms allowed them to decipher the greater cosmological significance of the events, and in turn explain them with an eye towards encouraging or preventing future occurrences. For example, the Maya were very good at back calculating the dates of eclipses in histories from ones they observed. This was useful because they could then seek correlations between historical eclipses and past events like wars, the rise and falls of kings, epidemics, time period endings, droughts, etc., and thus suggest possible prognostication along with what deities were involved. When like-in-kind events happened during their time, another way of thinking of this is a kind of calendrical numerology, where groups of numbers of days are linked to both religious and secular significance, sometimes with physical manifestations that could be observed on Earth. We also know that divination by ritual specialists was important among all social classes and a part of daily life in Mayan society, not just the elites. We have archaeological evidence from modest non-elite sites, such as agricultural villages of Soren, El Salvador, where the divination house was found with the remains of the equipment used for prediction was left in the front room that may have been a place commoners, farmers could consult with the shaman or priests. Both in past and present, Mayan specialists have been involved in diagnosing and curing illnesses. They use bowls of water, pyrite mirrors, glass balls, polished crystals, and other reflective surfaces to see into other levels of the universe, diagnose illnesses, and also predict future developments. Pattern, textiles, and bark paper manuscripts were also used in combinations with sacred stones, beans, maize kernels to cast lots and compare the patterns thrown with calendrical day counts, providing insight to the best and worst days for planting, naming children, traveling, and trading or sacrifice. Guys, we've already done oracle bones. How big is this one? Oh, this is the Chinese burning of bones. Okay, you know what? This is different bone reading. We'll read it too. We'll get through it. We got through this whole, I thought, the table of contents already. I thought we were wrapping this up. Let me get a new piece of paper for oracle bones. We're close to finishing this up, I think. Okay, oracle bones. To see a prediction, find an expert interpreter who can crack bones with heat, interpret the cracked meaning. A bone, shell, often turtle, plastron, instrument that applied extreme heat. So basically you burn the shit out of something until it cracks. Trained expert in bone burning is the person. Oracle bones, animal bones used for astromatic divination rituals in East Asia are one of the most important types of bone artifacts in Chinese Neolithic or Bronze Age sites and a source of inscriptions representing the earliest written texts in ancient China. Pyroestomancy is, in general, a process where random cracks, random and human, because we're going to have a person interpret this, of course, again, appear in the bone after it is heated by fire and a hot poker that cracks, and the pattern of cracks is interpreted by a human expert. Typically in ancient China, some inscription is made on the bone after the ceremony, recording what might or did happen. Although these inscriptions remain the focus of most research, oracle bones use far predates the inscribed examples and continues after they were a primary medium for writing. According to published data, the earliest oracle bones in China came from the site in northern China that dates to the late 4th millennia BCE. Between the late 3rd millennia and late 2nd millennia BCE, oracle bone divination became increasingly specialized and focused on a limited variety of animals, taxa, as it was associated with individuals and institutions that held power and positions of power in early Chinese politics. Based on the inscriptions of the Bronze Age oracle bones from the site at Zhengsun in Anyang, Henan, we know that the burning of these bones was a central part of the system of prognostication that was associated with decision-making by the royal court of the Song dynasty. We can further infer that the other examples of oracle bones that are not inscribed represents divination practices in various contexts in early China and represents the significant role that divination practices had in helping people make sense of the dynamic and unpredictable world in which they lived. Timeline. Chinese bone burning was most common during the Song dynasty, which started around 1600 BCE and lasted until 1046 B, when the Song was replaced by the Zhou dynasty. The expert in divination guide for Chinese bone burning is Professor Rowan Fland. The John E. Hudson Professor of Archaeology in Harvard's Department of Anthropology. Professor Fland's research focused on late Neolithic and early Bronze Age Chinese archaeology and anthropology, and he has gone on numerous excavation and digs in China. His most recent book is Ancient Central China, Center and Peripheries Along the Yangtze River, Case Studies in Early Societies. Okay, let's listen to his videos now.
My name is Rowan Fladd. I'm a faculty member in the anthropology department here, and I work on archaeology in China. And so what I'm going to tell you a little bit about today is a prediction method, a divination process that was used in early China. And in particular, I'm going to be talking about a period in Chinese history at the beginning of the dynastic cycle, so about 3,500 years ago, associated with a dynasty called the Shang dynasty. Have any of you ever heard of the term oracle bones? Oracle bones often bring to mind writing. And the reason for that is that the first inscriptions known from China, first writing we know from Chinese context, and the first historical documents we have come from bones like these. And so the documents that we have that mark the beginning of the historical record in China are divination records for the most part. And they're records that document a series of questions or issues that the Shang court wanted to know more information about from the spirit world around them. Inscriptions were first identified by an aristocrat who lived at the very end of the 19th century, beginning of the 20th century, named Wang Yiru. And he was sick and had some member of his household go to the apothecary to get what were sometimes referred to as dragon bones. These were essentially bones that were found in archaeological contexts that would then be ground up into powder and added into medicine. And those powders were thought to be beneficial to one's health. So he sent somebody out, and they brought back some bones like this. And what we have on here is an inscription that's a fragment of a divination record. Wang Yi recognized that this was writing because he was a scholar himself. He recognized that they bore some similarities to characters that he knew from archaic contexts. And he started to compile these, buy them up from apothecaries around all over the place. We learned a lot about the Shang based on these, and what we've learned mostly about is what the Shang royalty were most concerned about, and they were divining about. Each of these divination inscriptions has several different sections. They don't all have it, but a complete one has several different sections. It has a date on it, which is very important. Now, these are not absolute dates. They're dates in a cycle of 60 days. So there's a 60-day cycle, and each of these inscriptions, when they're complete, will have two characters at the beginning of it that mark the date within the 60-day cycle. Then they will tell you about who it is that was responsible for the divining. And then after that, there's a charge. There's basically a topic about which the diviners wanted to know. And then what would have happened is you would have had diviners who recorded the dates. They recorded the topic that they were divining about, not on the bones initially. Then they wait to see what happens, and then they record the result. And then all of that is inscribed onto the bones in certain cases.
Okay. Just trying to figure out exactly how much more we have.
This was not the beginning or the end of oracle bone divination in China. In fact, it started a couple thousand years earlier. We have archaeological evidence from at least as late as the 3rd millennium BC. In the early stages of divination, so during the late part of the Neolithic in China, when this type of pyrosteomancy, which is a fancy term for fire-based divination using bone, pyrosteomancy took place. The earliest pyrosteomancy was used shoulder blades. They start to prepare the bone by taking off the spine and then even preparing some marks, some divination holes into which a hot brand could have been placed. But as the role of this type of divination became more important in the associated society, there was increasing efforts to control the effects. Where you see this pair of holes, you have a long chisel mark, and then on the side of it, there's a more shallow drill mark or hollow. What they would have done is put the burner, the poker, right onto that shallower hollow, and then that would cause a crack that went both along the deeper hollow and then under the shallow hollow. So this is the plastron of a turtle. The plastron is the breastplate of a turtle. Many of these inscriptions have a positive and a negative version on the same bone. So you'll have, crack making on a particular day by a certain individual. We will have good harvest. And then on the other side of the suture, for example, you'll have exactly the opposite. Crack making on that same day, a certain individual, we will not have good harvest. When these were used in the more kind of advanced stage of this divination, was they would first flatten them, and so you have an area that becomes a big flat, like this, right? And it's on these big flat areas that the divination would have taken place.
Okay.
The people who were invested.
I was
in this type of
picturing them
divination
actually putting
living in a
the
city
thing
where,
in the fire, not just putting a hot rod to
a huge
it.
amount of resources were being spent on creation of bronze objects using extremely hot temperatures. There would have been a great deal of knowledge about the control of fire. They were also creating all sorts of tools and objects out of bone. What hopefully this has demonstrated is not kind of the trivial thing about that you can burn bone, but rather that this is kind of difficult. And there's a lot of specialized knowledge involved in how this divination process and any other divination process work. So this whole process of development from more than 5,000 years ago till 3,500 years ago, 1,500-year process of increasing complexity to the way in which this divination practice took place. It was the result of a series of experiments and attempts by diviners to use the knowledge they had about the medium that they were using to make the process more predictable in a way that they could then communicate with other diviners about what it is that they were interpreting. And then it sort of stopped archaeologically in sometime between 1045 and 1049 BC. And a group called the Zhou, together with some collaborators, overthrew the Shang. And they become at least nominally, the polity and power for the next 1,000 years almost. The transition from the Shang to the Zhou was one that was fraught by kind of military conflict and kind of transitions in power, but also changes in terms of the way that ritual practices took place. It's clearly not the case that the Zhou polity and the center of it was as invested as the Shang were in using divination as their main means of using bone-based divination as their main means of communication with the ancestors and as a decision-making tool for political, social, and kind of economic maneuvering.
Okay, good to know. Seems like a horrible system of deciding things. Deep breath. Deep breath, guys. We're powering through this. I'm going to click the progress button, find out where we're at on things. Okay. It says we're 57% complete through this. I would hope that we're a little further than that, but who knows? Resume course. I'm betting we're more than 56%. Okay, ready for the Oracles of Delphi section. I'm gonna be honest. I'm gonna take a quick, like, 5-minute break. Go use the restroom, and then we'll knock more of this out, because I don't know how long this is gonna take. So I'd like to be braced and not be like feeling like I want to, go somewhere real quick. Hold on 1 second. Thank you guys for waiting patiently. I do hope you're all kicking ass today. I am kicking ass myself. It just, whew. There's a lot of freaking sections of this, right? How to seek a prediction. Travel to Delphi, possibly find a priest, ask the oracle or priest your question. Equipment is none. That's not true. The caves that they would set in have gases that, affected them, but that's just fact. The Oracles of Delphi, a middle-aged woman from a nearby area, possibly along with a priest who might be needed to ask the oracle questions and interpret the answers on behalf of the petitioner, if they do not ask on their own. The ancient Greeks thought that Delphi, located in modern-day southwest Greece at the base of Mount Parnassus, was the center of the world. Indeed, the Greeks called it Apollos, which means navel. Apollo's temple, adorned with his famous Maxis, Know Thyself, stood in Delphi from approximately the 7th century BCE until 390 CE. Apollo was purported to speak to those who sought him out through a mouthpiece, the Oracle of Delphi, also known as the Pythia or the Sibyl. The oracle was a middle-aged woman chosen from Delphi or a nearby area. She is described as wearing the clothes of a younger woman and sitting on a 3-legged tripod. Once a month, men lined up to ask the oracle questions. Before a petitioner could ask a question, he had to first cleanse himself by bathing and then sacrifice a goat to Apollo. Many details about the Oracle of Delphi are still unknown, including the specifics of the oracle's process for divining an answer. There is speculation that the oracle's trance was the result of intoxication, possibly caused by natural gases that were present in Delphi. Though the contradictories though this contradicts some accounts which describe oracles as calm. Additionally, being on drugs does not necessarily mean you're not going to be calm, or being messed with by gases in some capacity. Additionally, some accounts describe the oracles as giving her response as poetic riddles. Though there is no official written record of the oracle's prediction, there is also an unresolved question on whether or not questions were asked directly to the oracle, or if questions were relayed from the petitioner to the oracle through a priest. In any case, this was clearly a very human-influenced way of seeking from the gods about one's future. Timeline. Prognostication by an oracle at Delphi appeared to have began around 800 BCE and lasted until 395 CE, when Roman Emperor Theodosius the First officially ordered the oracles silent and had the temple destroyed as part of a campaign against non-Christian religions. Professor Emma Dench is the McLean Professor of Ancient and Modern Histories and of Classics at Harvard University. She is the author of Romulus, Asylum, Roman Identities from the Age of Alexander to the Age of Hadrian. Professor Dench has been awarded the Harvard Professorship, an award given for excellence in undergraduate teaching, mentoring, and advising. Good for her. Hope she's awesome at this stuff. I'm sure she is.
The Oracle of Apollo at Delphi was the most famous place where you could consult the gods in the ancient Greek world. The oracle was in the Temple of Apollo at Delphi in central Greece. Delphi was thought to be the central point of the Greek world, and the Greeks called it the omphalos, or navel. Apollo was able to answer questions 1 day a month, 9 months of the year. He got the winters off. Only men could ask questions of the oracle. The men had to purify themselves by washing before entering the sanctuary, and then they had to sacrifice a goat to Apollo. The goat needed to quiver to show that the god was ready to answer the question. The inquirers then had to line up in a pre-established order of precedence according to where they came from. Those from Delphi and the immediate neighborhood were first in the line. Apollo's mouthpiece was a priestess chosen from the village of Delphi and known as the Pythia. She was said to be an ordinary middle-aged woman dressed in the clothes of a virgin, so the clothes of a much younger unmarried woman. At the beginning of the day, she washed in the Castalian spring to purify herself before sitting on a 3-legged tripod inside the temple of Apollo. She entered a trance-like state. There's been a lot of modern speculation on whether she was high on fumes or drugs, but it's actually unlikely that her trance was chemically induced. The most reliable ancient accounts suggest she was calm rather than ranting and raving. We think that the questioner also entered the temple of Apollo, although he may have stood in a separate room. The question was typically framed as either, should I do X, or is it better to do A or B? The question might be about something quite personal, like going on a journey, or getting married, or having children. Or it might be a matter of state, like going to war, founding a city, or endorsing the decision of the political assembly. The Pythia would then give her reply, probably in simple spoken form, although there are also lots of ancient accounts of giving her responses in complicated, riddling hexameter verse. The fame of the Oracle of Delphi means there are many legendary or apocryphal stories of responses, including notorious riddles that were misinterpreted by their hearers. One example is of Croesus, the 6th century BCE king of Lydia, who was told that if he made war on the Persians, he would destroy a great kingdom. He thought that that meant that he would destroy the Persian kingdom, but of course it turned out to be that his own kingdom of Lydia was destroyed when he was defeated by the Persian king Cyrus. Although this example is apocryphal, it illustrates the importance not just of the oracular response, but of the questioner himself, and sometimes his whole family or community, having to work out what the oracle means.
Okay, well, they were going to be right no matter what on that prediction, but that's interesting. Okay, we already read about this earlier. I will knock it out anyway. This is the Romans bird stuff, and we'll put Roman augury. Okay. How to seek prediction. Entries and entreat an augury with access to birds, or you may need to also find a special bird. The bird, possibly equipment to measure observations with behavior. An augury trained to interpret the behavior of birds. Ancient Roman divination was tied to the concept of auspices, which literally means look for fortunate signs in birds in Latin. An individual who looks for the signs is called an augur. Indeed, the founding myth of Rome involves Romulus and Remus performing bird augury to decide that Rome should be built on the Palatine Hill. Notably, however, like most things in a Roman religion, the concept of auspices appears to be borrowed from other religions, specifically the ancient Greeks. Auspices were taken before any major undertaking, private or public, began in ancient Rome. The birds apparently made random, so we're going to go random human, flight patterns and noises, and whether or not they fed when offered food were all interpreted by a human augur or auspice. These signs relied on the augurs were often vague, and most explanations behind the vague predictions were simple, that it was the will of God. As a result, at least in cases of public auspices, the Roman Senate debated the meaning of the auspices before coming to an actionable decision. Members in the priesthood of augurs was prestigious. Until 300 BCE, members of the priesthood of augurs was restricted to only members of the patrician ruling class. The Lex Augulia allowed for plebeians, commoners, to become augurs, but the augurs often held other posts outside of the priesthood. For example, Cicero, the famous orator and senator, was also appointed an augur later in his political career. Roman birds, augurs, have evidence dating back to around 600 BC, and it remained popular until approximately 100 CE. Now we will We'll have to watch this real quick.
Senior political officials of the Roman state had to take auspices before any major political event,
good
like
to know.
elections and before a battle. They would draw on the expertise of an augur from the College of Augurs. Membership of the College of Augurs was for life, with new members elected periodically. Two of the main kinds of auspices that were deliberately taken involved birds. One type involved watching for the flights of specific kinds of birds, eagles, vultures, buzzards, or woodpeckers, or listening for the cries of birds, crows, owls, and eagles. You had to work out whether the birds were good or bad, and this was determined partially by where they appeared in the sky in relation to a grid that crisscrossed where the viewer stood, the height at which they flew, and the speed and noise of their wing movements. The other main method of bird divination involved observing whether or not the sacred chickens ate the food that was given to them. You had to take auspices
Sacred
at
chickens.
night, and they were valid only for the day to come. So if the activity you were taking auspices for was continued or delayed, you had to repeat them. Even though you were only looking for a yes or no on the timing of the event, the law was complicated and open to interpretation and to challenges. Even if the day had been cleared for the activity, other officers of state could claim to see spontaneous signs from the gods that meant that the event had to be cancelled.
Boom. Okay, so what we learned about how help future students by selecting the skill or subject that you learned from this unit. We did not learn astronomy from this unit. We learned forecasting. We'll submit that. We'll click forward. Tarot. I think we all know about tarot cards, guys. We'll read the section on tarot cards. I'm pretty sure that we're good on this, but let's read it, right? Okay. How to see a prediction. Anyone can consult an expert. Common in almost all European and American system. Equipment is tarot cards. Specialized expert reader of tarot cards. The tarot is a card oracle, most often consisting of a deck of 56 minor arcana and 22 major arcana. The white deck, by the way, is the most common deck, you guys. I don't know if they're going to get into... Oh, they do get into that right down here. A.E. White. That guy's really smart. The minor arcana have number cards and face cards arranging in suits. Much like modern playing cards, major arcana have evocative names like the Fool, Death, and the Wheel of Fortune. Oracle readings are made by drawing one or more cards, often placing them in a particular pattern, and interpreting the symbolic meaning in relationship to the current. While the tarot is not only card oracle, it is by far the most common, and the term cartomancy most often refers to the use of tarot for divination. The cards that are involved in modern day tarot were originally created as a set of playing cards, much like the simple deck used for poker and bridge. They were often used in the mid-15th century, though the late 18th century when they began to be used for cartomancy. Early tarot decks had hand-painted. Some tarot readers continue this practice today, but most decks are now mass-produced. Modern tarot decks come in a variety of styles. Most are similar to the Rider-Waite deck, created by published by A.E. White and William Rider in 1910, with illustrations by Pamela Smith. They draw on medieval and Renaissance European symbolism to hide meanings within the illustrations. Other decks incorporate a broad range of influences, ranging from the Kabbalah to Zen Buddhism to modern internet culture. Different decks often have different orders for the major arcana, different names for the suits, i.e. coins instead of pentacles, or even different symbology and interpretations for the same card. As the demonstration video here shows, a tarot reading is a personal experience relying heavily on interpretation by the diviner or reading. Shuffling a tarot deck is similar to shaking the dice before you roll them, in that it presumably randomizes. So we're going to go randomized, humanistic, and deterministic. Okay. Shuffling the, okay. the outcome to follow, and giving a seemingly deterministic system prescribed for laying out the randomized cards, it is important to remind ourselves that interpreting the cards laying out still relies heavily on the conversation between humans, currents, and diviner. Much in the same way that systems like IFA and Turkish coffee divination do. I just learned about Turkish coffee divination the other day while visiting with a random person from Turkey, actually. The use of tarot in divination ceremonies is still common today. Most small cities will have at least one fortune teller who uses tarot to advise currents about their day-to-day lives and major decisions. Large cities will have several. Many of these fortune tellers combine cartomancy with scrying a crystal ball and other methods. Tarot has been practiced since 1600 CE and continues to be a popular form of divination. The diviner guide expert on tarot is Dr. Colin Fredericks. Dr. Fredericks is a senior project lead at HarvardX, where he has helped design and produce many HarvardX courses, including PredictionX, Super Earths and Life, Energy Within Environmental Constraints. Colin is a man of eclectic hobbies, including tarot, and he also designs role-playing games in his spare time. Sounds like a cool guy. We like role-playing games. Okay, that's the Celtic Cross layout, by the way. Below, you can see both a short summary video of tarot along with a longer in-depth video. Additionally, there is a special segment with artist James Leonard below Colin's video, and that video is about James' tent of casual observation phenologies and how it uses tarot to help connect people to climate change. Okay, I think we'll probably be good on not watching the climate change video, but
we talked some about the meaning of the cards, but now I want to show you how they're used for fortune telling. I'm going to shuffle the deck, and then I'm going to lay them out in one of the most common patterns, the Celtic Cross. Normally we would be doing a reading for a specific person. In this case, I don't have someone to do a reading for, so I'm just going to talk about what the cards would mean in different positions. The first card is intended to represent the person who is asking the question, the querent. This card is laid in the center, upright or reversed, however it's drawn from the deck. And then another card is played across that. This card represents the problems that the person is facing. In this case, our first card was the Three of Swords, which you can tell is somewhat a bleak card to begin with, and then has been crossed with the Tower. And the Tower, as we mentioned before, is quite a difficult card. You can see that it's a bit of chaos, either upright or reversed. To the left of these cards, we place one that represents the past of the person in question, and to the right, we place a card that represents their future. Above, we place a card that represents the conscious goals of our querent. Below, we place one that represents their subconscious goals. You can see a lot of duality here, the self and the conflict, the before and the after, the conscious and the subconscious. After that, 4 cards are stacked from bottom to top on the right-hand side. The first one represents advice that should be given to the querent. The second one is about external influences, which could be positive or negative. Card number 9, second to last, represents the hopes and fears of the querent. This is one card where it's especially important to look at both the regular meaning and the reversed meaning. Finally, our last card, card number 10,
It's final outcome.
is about the outcome that is likely to occur. This outcome card can also be read both reversed and upright. You can think of it as, if you take the advice, this will happen. If you don't take the advice, that will happen. This requires a lot of work between the fortune teller and the querent. You need to understand the meaning of the cards, but you also need to understand where that person is when they're asking the question. You can't just do a reading blank for someone. You need to know a little bit about them. So that's one of the most important things to know about all of this. You can't automatically generate this. Just because someone takes the advice that was prescribed for them doesn't mean that they are going to be free with their money or that they're going to be covetous of it. You need to understand where that person is in their life and what the appropriate advice to give is based on that card. You can't just read it straight and hope that it works. This is common across a lot of fortune-telling systems, including Ifa in the Yoruba tradition. You really need a connection with a human being. So this is the Celtic Cross. It's not the only spread that you'll see. People will arrange cards in different ways, especially with different decks, but it is the most common. And if you go to a fortune teller, you might see them use this spread.
Okay. I don't think we need the in-depth, and we don't need the correlation with global warming on it, I'm pretty sure. But, whew. I don't know what tessography... Oh, this is tea reading and coffee reading. Okay. Tessography. How to seek a prediction. Find an expert in interpretation of patterns formed in purposely initiated random processes that interpret patterns on their remains. Okay, so this is random human. Okay. Tessography is the given name to a set of divination methods that utilizes interpretation of random patterns found in coffee remains, wine, sentiment, tea leaves, and molten substances like wax and lead. Often, other most widely practiced forms of tessography survive the test of time in Turkish coffee reading. Widely practiced in the Balkans and Turkey, upon drinking Turkish coffee over a nice, intimate conversation, fortunes are told by human interpretation based on the pattern found in the leftover coffee sediments in the cup. Turkish coffee readings serves a rather social purpose in today's society, assumed to have descended from the palaces of the Ottoman sultans. Many adults take elongated breaks in the evening and on the weekends, 2 to 3 hours, to have a heartfelt conversation followed by a ritual of coffee tessography. The diviner utilizes information acquired throughout the preceding conversation to develop a prediction about the current state of one's life and one's future. The coffee is drank from only one side of the cup, and the querent chats with the diviner. When only sediments are left, the coffee is turned over onto a saucer and turned 3 times clockwise while making a wish. A querent wishing to hear about his or her romantic life puts the ring on top of the overturned cup, and one more interested in financial puts a coin on top instead. As sediment dries out, they slowly form shapes in the cup and on the saucer that get interpreted as representing real-life concepts and objects like eagles, mountains, the number 6, the letter B. The diviner interprets the shapes, tessography, in the sediment and forms the backbone of the reading, and they are most likely utilized to reassure the persons whose fortune is being told that a certain portion of their wishes will come true immediately, and some will come true after they overcome certain challenges. The general rule of thumb for diviners is to never deliver only good or only bad fortunes to avoid making the person too happy or too sad. Once all the shapes in the cups are interpreted, it's time to interpret the shapes on the saucer, which generally is believed to hold information about whether the wish made initially will come true or not. The divination is only over when the current goes and washes their own cup, while thinking of the wish they have made intensely. Whether performed by a childhood friend or a professional fortune teller, coffee tessography is a popular way to distress and socialize in distress and socialize in modern Turkey, where friends can catch up on each other's lives and hear about each other's aspirations and worries in a cordial setting. Most importantly, drinking coffee and the act of interpreting the coffee grounds ultimately acts as a facilitator to a rarely encountered genuine process of building intimate emotional bonds. Tessography in the form of reading Turkish coffee grounds started around 1500 CE and continues to be a popular form of divination. Meet the expert Congress Kamalaglu. I wish I said that right, but I'm sure I didn't. The Diviner's Guide expert in tessography is Congress Kamalaglu, who is a student at Harvard College. Congress is originally from Azerbaijan, but moved to Turkey when he was a child. In Turkey, Congress worked in a coffee shop during the summer doing coffee cup divination reading. Congress is fluent in 5 languages, and he is studying government and anthropology at Harvard, and he worked on PredictionX as a Radcliffe Research Fellow. Good for him. Hope he does big things in life.
First I should add water.
Oh, this is going to be 10 minutes. Let's watch it.
Çünkü sert kahve ya, öyle yemek yemeden içilmez yani.
Kahve
Böyle-
tüketimimiz azaldı mı acaba? Vay
Olur.
vay 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 vay.
Tamam. Şimdi çöpü var mı seninkinin?
I was born in Baku, Azerbaijan. My parents are from a small tribe in Azerbaijan called Mountain Jews, and they immigrated when I was 4 from Azerbaijan to Turkey. So for the biggest chunk of my life, I grew up in Istanbul, Turkey, and had a great time, learned a lot about Turkish culture. I wanted to work over summer, and one of the best kind of work opportunities for people my age who speak some kind of English was to work as a fortune teller for the tourists.
Oh, can we have some coffee?
Yes,
Oh,
let's
okay.
start.
Yeah, yeah.
So
okay.
let's, yeah.
Yeah.
It's good,
Oh,
right?
it's delicious. Yeah.
It's great.
How do we do this?
Okay, so first we're going to take the coffee cup,
Okay.
and then we're going to cover it with the saucer.
Okay. Got it.
Okay, and then with your thumb at the bottom, and then your index finger and middle finger on the top.
Okay, like this?
Now, yes. And now you're going to make a wish
A
that you're
wish.
not going to tell us,
Okay.
and keep about that wish and how much you want this wish to happen
Okay.
in real life.
Okay.
And while doing it, turn 3 times clockwise.
Okay.
Okay? And then now we're going to very quickly turn it outwards and put it, the saucer, on the table.
Okay. Yep.
And while we're doing this, I'm going to say a Turkish phrase
Okay.
that basically says, whatever is my situation, let that appear in the cup.
Okay.
Okay. Neyse halim çıksın falim. Okay. Great. Now we're going to let it cold a little bit. But
Okay.
before we do that, would you mind putting your ring or a coin? A ring indicates that you want to hear more about personal relationships, romantic relationships, friends, love, sort of things. A coin indicates you want to know more about your professional goals, money, bank accounts.
Let's go personal.
Okay.
Okay.
So
put the
just
coin,
put it on the...
Put it on there?
Yeah.
Okay.
And we believe that the energy of the ring and what the ring stands for is
Okay.
going to actually influence what is going to be seen in the cup. It's not only about the future, it's also about what's present and the past,
Okay.
which also nurtures our knowledge of what is future going to be, right?
Right.
We'll wait a little bit until it dries. The fortune teller, obviously, like all the types of other fortune telling, I
Yeah.
think a lot of them, you try to read your customer in a way. So like you first, what happens, one of my instructions in the cafe was the tourist would come, I would ask tourists a bunch of introductory questions, try to understand whether this person is rich or poor, or married or single, where is this person from, and kind of understand what are the worries in this person's mind. And after you drink the coffee and start interpreting the coffee, you kind of project the things you've learned about this person into the coffee cup and pretend that it's the coffee cup that's telling you all those things that you have learned before.
So
So
scam
you really
it.
use your interpretation skills in ways. It's almost like clinical psychology practice where you are trying to bring, without giving like directed advice to the individuals, you're trying to lead them to come to advice they want to hear by themselves and they want to do. So I think some of the fortune tellers would really approach their work from that lens. But we also used to have a booklet, and the booklet basically was, this was a short, like maybe 10, 15 pages booklet, but would say like rabbit means this, star means that, I don't know, like a skyscraper means this, etc., etc. So this way, when we interpret the shapes, we have kind of a basis. A lot of people have different ways of looking at the cup inside, because now you're going to see I'm going to divide the cup in different parts, and different parts for me is going to mean different things. So I'll put my cup away.
Okay.
And I will return your ring to you.
Thank you.
The energy is there.
Oh, I feel it.
And I will flip the cup over. Ooh. The way I look at the cup is always basically the handle parts. This part is about love. This part is about wealth. When I cut from the middle, the left part is about going to be present and the past, and then the right part is about going to be about the future.
Okay.
And the very dark bottom is going to be about family.
Some other people at Radcliffe here also had this discussion about whether people really, really want to know the future, or whether they just kind of want to chat about the future. And, you know, maybe what you're saying is right, or maybe there's just a nice opportunity to have a chat. So what was the balance of that kind of goal with people?
I think for our culture, most of the time, it's a social tool to get to know other people and catch up with friends. So when you say, let's have a cup of Turkish coffee, this means that you're committing for like a chunk of an hour and a half, 2 hours, to actually sit down. It's not something on the go. And you sit down and really discuss life matters, right? Let's say like you are divorcing from someone, or you are changing your career path, you're relocating from one city to another, or your mother is going through an illness, kind of like important events in your life, and you want those events to be, you know, discussed and mentioned and shared with someone. But you also want to know whether those events are potentially going to come to a positive or a negative outcome. So I think coffee drinking culture really, and the coffee cup fortune telling, really enables that type of a venue for people to alleviate.
This is super interesting. It seems like more of a social type thing than anything.
Historical records of the Ottoman Empire, that it's around 16th century when the Ottoman Sultan for the first time kind of started having this. What we call today the Turkish coffee actually comes from Yemen. And it was imported in the Ottoman times when basically it was a part of Ottoman Empire and came all the way to the Sultan, and Sultan loved the taste of it. And we know that some of the people were brought from the city, from Istanbul at the time, to come to the Sultan and give his fortune from looking at the cup. And kind of that's how it spread to the elite, local elite of the Ottoman Empire at the time, and from there spread onwards to all the region. I see a volcano.
A volcano? Oh, look at that. That looks almost like a pyramid volcano kind of thing.
You see there's some lava coming. Actually, volcano is a very common feature in coffee cup fortune telling.
Really?
There's a mountain and a volcano. Volcano happens when the top is not sharp.
I see.
And a mountain happens when the top is sharp. Mountain means actually there's going to be a challenging path, and at the end there's going to be a lot of relief and a lot of happiness. Volcano means there's a lot of something coming. It's like a volcano eruption. That might mean good things or bad things.
Great.
But mostly, volcanoes indicate that there's a lot of energy of some sort that's coming your way. And this volcano gladly has an opening. Do you see that at the end there's an opening?
Definitely.
So this opening would indicate once again that whether this volcano brings you bad news or good news, whether there's a lot of bad things happening or a lot of good things happening in one moment, it is going to resolve in good. If this was completely closed, which could happen, have happened, if that was completely closed, that would mean that it's just going to be negative results, even if it's a positive volcano. So this would mean nothing to worry. There's going to be a time that's coming in the new future. And we also know that coffee cups cannot tell you more than 40 days.
Oh, really?
So this is in the next 40 days.
Is that to ensure the return of the patron to the coffee cup fortune teller?
It means that I want to see my friend again.
Got it. Okay.
In
Got it.
no more than 40 days. When I was growing up and my mom was working and I was like, I don't know, 9 years old, 10 years old, and I didn't want to stay alone, I would go with my mom to the work and see all these women doing these different types of like fortune telling and prediction systems,
Right.
according to the cycles, lunar cycles, or astrology, about what's going to happen in certain Turkish people's lives.
Right. And that was
I thought they were going to go into it a little more.
Yeah, it was a big part of the local culture, and I think there's definitely certain individuals who choose to not engage in it,
Right.
and there's certain individuals who choose to believe in it a lot. In
Right.
Azeri, we have a phrase that says, don't ever believe into fortune telling fully, but never stay without fortune telling.
Yeah.
So you need to like do it a little bit, but not too much. If you see, there's a bunch of towers actually. This could be an Eiffel Tower.
I am going on the Eiffel Tower
Amazing.
tour. I've never been to France many times, and I've
You see
never
the
gone
tower?
up on the Eiffel Tower.
And the
My
Eiffel
daughter and I are
Tower
doing that.
is, oh my god, the Eiffel Tower
It looks
is
exactly like the Eiffel
it
Tower.
does exactly look like
Can
the
you-
Eiffel
can
Tower.
you turn that so that
Yeah.
we can see a picture
And
of
the Eiffel Tower is in the romantic side.
Oh.
Like the relationship,
come
friendship,
on, it's
relationship
Paris,
side.
and
It
it's
is. It might be a city of
romance.
romance. So the main situation of where I see coffee being drank is like the middle-aged population, because they have the biggest worries, I think, in their lives.
The biggest
you know,
worries.
about money, about love, about marriage, about different things.
Okay.
So they usually see this as a tool that they can believe, and they still consume Turkish coffee a lot. A lot of times, the people who are going to do it are the people who have the time to be able to commit 2 hours to a friend and you know, sit down and.
Well, you were also saying something about people don't drink the coffee for the caffeine. Is that what you said
Yeah,
before?
totally.
Yeah.
I think
It's a purely social
yeah,
event.
100%. No one would drink Turkish coffee because I want to stay awake that night, which I feel like people in the States and Harvard
Yeah.
specifically would do it like to be like, oh, I need to waken up today.
Does it have a lot of caffeine? Or
It has
I'm
a
going
lot
to
of
find
caffeine.
out later.
It has a lot of caffeine. And I think maybe some people would find it offensive if you drank this coffee in a rush to just keep yourself awakened. Because it is an offense to the tradition of drinking this coffee and making this coffee. And as we saw earlier, it takes time to make this coffee.
Right.
It's not an instant process,
Right.
and you really need to spend time. And no life is going to go completely horrendous.
Right.
And no life is going to go without any problem.
Right.
So it's important to highlight opportunities of growth and opportunities of concern, and really put attention to certain letters and certain characters, and see whether those letters and those people and those types of concepts appear in your life.
Well, I
in the future.
completely get it now.
Not
Gets
fully sure.
stronger on the
Yeah,
bottom.
Yeah.
Well, I kind of want to have Turkish coffee. I don't need somebody to read my future. I'd let them. But, I mean, like, the Turkish coffee sounds dang good. Whew. Okay, we're at this part where we're going to read the cross-cultural stuff. In the cross-cultural conversation, we have assembled experts from various schools. Oh, was this its own whole section? I'm gonna just look ahead to see how in trouble we are, because this might be something that we end up doing a little bit tomorrow. You know what? Tomorrow we're gonna have to hit this up more, because I didn't realize this was so big. And in all honesty, guys, I actually do have to do things today. I thought we'd just be able to knock this out in one little shot. So we did get all the way through a huge amount of it. I do want to thank you guys for hanging out. I'll obviously change it to where we have part 1. We didn't actually knock out the whole course in a single today. Tomorrow, I will knock out some more of it, because we have the entire cross-cultural section to still do. It does look like we are 74% of the way through. So tomorrow we should be able to get through it pretty dang fast the rest of the way. And so I'm super excited to do that. But I do actually have things I need to knock out. And so sadly enough, this is where we're going to call it for the day. I want to thank you guys so much for hanging out. Peace, very best wishes, and I'll catch you guys tomorrow. You guys stay epic.